Hey guys, tonight we're going to time travel all the way back to the 17th century and drop you straight into the thick of Amish life. Before the bonnets, before the buggies, and way before the butter churn TikToks. You're not just learning history tonight, you're living it. And heads up, you probably won't survive this. Like statistically speaking, most of you wouldn't even make it past your first Pennsylvania winter. But don't worry, we'll take it slow. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and time in the comments too. I want to know where you're watching from and how late you're staying up for this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1693. You're standing in the green valleys and rocky foothills of Switzerland, but you're not feeling particularly patriotic. The air is crisp with autumn, laced with the faint scent of chimney smoke and damp wool. But your eyes are fixed on something else entirely. Escape. You belong to a religious group called the Swiss Brethren, plain folks with some very unorthodox ideas. You believe in adult baptism, non-violence, separation from worldly governments, and living modestly, almost to the point of invisibility. And for this, you're considered dangerous. The church hates you. The state wants you gone. You've watched neighbours thrown in dungeons. Some were branded or beaten. Others drowned or burned for refusing to recant. You've survived so far, partly because you've learned to walk quietly and keep your opinions even quieter. But lately whispers have been growing about a man named Jakob Ammon. Jakob is intense. He's one of your own, a devout Anabaptist preacher, but his ideas are even stricter. He's calling for a purer life, harsher discipline, and complete withdrawal from anyone who strays. It's not exactly the soothing balm you were hoping for, but somehow it makes sense. Jakob preaches that the world is corrupt beyond repair, and the only salvation is to separate from it entirely. No more living half in, half out. You and others begin following his teachings, and just like that, the Amish identity is born. Not from a celebration, but a slow-motion fracture. A split within a split. The original Anabaptists called you too rigid. The Catholics and Protestants still want you dead. You can't win, and honestly, you're done trying. The plan? Leave. Not just your village or your canton. Leave Europe. Word has spread about a faraway land called Pennsylvania, where a Quaker named William Penn is welcoming all kinds of spiritual misfits. The land is rich, the laws are relaxed, and no one will be burning you at the stake for wearing homemade linen. But first, you have to get out. And that's not easy. The journey starts with secrecy. You sell your possessions quietly. Oxen, tools, heirlooms passed down for generations, all traded for passage and supplies. Some families vanish overnight, slipping over borders with forged papers. Others are more brazen, simply walking down the village road at dawn, never to return. You and your family leave under cover of darkness, your breath steaming in the cold. The wagon creaks with your few belongings. Children sleep wrapped in cloaks. You glance back only once, to the small candlelit window of the house where you were born, then forward again, because you can't afford to look back for long. You reach the Rhine River and board a small flat-bottomed boat, one of dozens carrying religious refugees down to the ports of Rotterdam or Hamburg. It's crowded, damp, miserable. You sleep beside strangers and barrels of cabbage. One man gets smallpox and is removed at the next port, his wife sobbing in silence. When you finally reach the harbour, the ocean yawns ahead, vast and terrifying. You've never seen anything like it. Ships sway against the docks, towering wooden beasts with sails like bloated ghosts. You board with your group, mostly Amish families, some Mennonites, and a few quiet loners. The captain doesn't care who you are. He wants payment and silence. And then, the voyage. You've heard the stories, but nothing prepares you for this. Months at sea, no fresh food. You eat salted beef, hardtack that cracks your molars, and stale water tinged with algae. Storms toss the ship like a child's toy. Vomit pools on the lower decks. Rats crawl over your feet at night. Someone gives birth mid-voyage. Someone else dies, wrapped in a shroud and slid overboard with a whispered prayer. You start to lose track of time. The days blur. The sun rises and sets, but the view never changes, just water and sky. People around you begin muttering about God's judgment, about never reaching land. The mood sours, and yet there's also hope. Quiet moments of singing in Low German, children laughing at seagulls. You hold tight to these. Then one morning land, a thin brown line on the horizon. It grows, shapes into trees and hills. Someone shouts, and before long, you're all pressing toward the railings. The smell hits first. Not brine, but earth, damp, living soil. You almost cry. You arrive in Philadelphia, still little more than a muddy settlement. William Penn's promise seems real. You're not arrested. No one yells at your clothes. No crosses burning. Just bustling markets, open land, and a strange blend of people. Quakers in grey, Swedes with furs, enslaved Africans working in fields, and Lenape natives watching from the tree line. But freedom, it turns out, is a lot of work. You're not handed a house and barn. You get a plot of uncleared forest and a few borrowed tools. That's it. You look at your new home, a thicket of towering trees, tangled brush, and the cry of something unknown echoing through the woods. Your children are hungry. Winter is coming. You're free, but very much on your own. You're on land now, but don't get too comfortable. Your boots are already sinking into Pennsylvania's damp, unfamiliar soil, and the trees don't care that you're religiously oppressed and emotionally wrung out. They're just trees, tall, ancient, knotted with vines and bursting with unfamiliar sounds. And now it's your job to cut them down, carve out a clearing, and somehow transform this wild, green chaos into a place that can feed, warm, and shelter your family before the cold comes. You've never worked this hard in your life. The first few weeks blur into a cycle of ache and adrenaline. You wake with the sun, or more accurately just before it, thanks to the roosters. There's no snooze button, no coffee to brace you for the day, just cold water to splash on your face and the sudden brutal realization that you've got an entire forest to clear and maybe a month of decent weather left. You start small. One tree, you swing your axe over and over, arms burning, shoulders screaming, sap flies in sticky arcs. The trunk groans like it knows it's dying, and when it finally crashes to the forest floor with a massive shuddering thud, you don't feel triumphant. You feel tired, and aware that there are about 300 more just like it. You work side by side with others in your group, Amish, Mennonites, even a few German Reformed settlers who've joined your tight little settlement out of practicality. Religious splits don't matter quite so much when everyone's starving and trying to not get eaten by bears. You trade labour. One week everyone helps clear the Stolzfuss land, the next week yours. Kids carry rocks, women haul branches. The Ordnung, the code you all live by, is unwritten but powerful, and even out here in the wild it shapes everything. No one complains, not out loud anyway. One night around the fire, someone jokes that if God really wanted you to settle here, he could have cleared a few trees in advance. No one laughs, not because it isn't funny, but because they're too exhausted. But still, you keep going. Every tree felled becomes wood for your future. Beams, rafters, firewood. You stack split logs in neat, hopeful piles. Someone brings plans for a cabin scribbled on scrap parchment. Low, one room, dirt floor, small windows to conserve heat. Nothing fancy. That's the point. The first structure you build is a lean-to, just enough to keep rain off your backs and wolves away from your goats. You start digging post holes for something sturdier almost immediately. There's no construction company to call, no nails unless you brought some from Europe. Everything is notched and fitted by hand. You learn to appreciate square pegs and wooden dowels like they're magic. And let's talk bugs. You didn't think to ask about bugs. Mosquitoes descend in biblical numbers. Gnats crawl into your eyes, your mouth, your sleeves. Something bites your ankle and you don't sleep for 2 nights. You want to believe it's a test from God, but you secretly wonder if this might just be punishment. Still, every day you get a little more settled, a little less overwhelmed. One afternoon, while digging out stones from what will become your garden plot, your youngest finds a fossil, an actual, honest-to-goodness shell embedded in rock. You don't have a word for it yet, but you know it's strange. A shell, in the middle of the forest. You pocket it, turn it over in your hand, and start to suspect the land has secrets you'll never quite understand. By week 6, you're running on habit. Mornings are for building and land clearing. Afternoons are for planting if the ground will cooperate or tending to animals. Evenings are for mending, prayers and long silences interrupted only by the crackling of firewood. At night, lying on straw-stuffed bedding inside your half-finished cabin, you think about Switzerland. Not fondly. You don't miss the persecution or the cramped farms. But you do miss the smell of fresh bread from your neighbour's oven. You miss knowing what each herb in the forest was called. You miss walking to church instead of being the church. The first storm comes in October. It's sudden, wind howling through the trees like wolves. The roof leaks. The shutters bang open. You all huddle together in the centre of the room, wrapped in whatever blankets you didn't trade for grain. Outside, lightning cracks the sky in half. Inside, you whisper Psalm 23 and try to believe it's enough. And then, somehow, it is. The storm passes, the cabin stands, the goats are still alive. It's not much, but it's survival, and that's something. Over the next few days, you notice something odd. You're starting to feel capable, not confident exactly, but like someone who belongs here. Your hands are rougher, your back stronger. You know where the sun hits first in the clearing and where the deer like to pass. You've stopped flinching at every twig snap in the woods. And then, because life likes to keep you humble, you slice your hand open, splitting kindling. It's not deep, but it bleeds a lot. You wrap it with linen and pine resin, then spend the next 3 days terrified of infection. If it gets worse, you know what will happen. People disappear from this world over a splinter. Your prayers become more focused. The wound scabs. You live. It's a small victory, but out here that's the only kind. So here you are, still breathing, still waking up to the sound of dew-soaked silence and the occasional goat making bad decisions. It's been a few months since you first stepped off that ship, and despite everything, your aching muscles, your eternally dirty fingernails, the cold that somehow crawls through walls, you've managed to not die. That's more than can be said for some. A few families have already packed up and left, heading south for warmer colonies or back east for what they call civilization. But you've dug in. Literally. By now your hands know the weight of a spade, the heft of a wooden bucket, and the delicate line between just wet enough soil and the soul-crushing disaster of a root cellar that floods. Every inch of this land you've cleared is a battlefield. You've fought roots, rocks, stubborn stumps, and your own lack of upper body strength. And finally you're standing in the middle of a field that might actually grow something. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, let's talk about the moment you really realise this wasn't a vacation. Your first full-blown Amish morning routine. Now, Amish life doesn't come with a snooze button or the mercy of electricity. You're awake as soon as the sky starts to hint at light. If you're lucky, a rooster announces it. If you're not, it's the cold, or the baby, or your neighbour's cow wandering into your cabbage patch again. You roll out of your straw tick mattress and straight into the floor with a dull thump. That's your body reminding you you're almost 30, which, in 17th century terms, is already considered middle-aged. You dress in the dark, fumbling into clothes you probably sewed yourself, thick linen shirts, woolen skirts, hand-knitted socks. Everything smells a little like smoke and sweat, and everything is made to last, not to impress. Before you eat, before you speak, you pray. A soft, murmured grace that gives thanks for the day and the people in your life, even the ones who steal your eggs. And then it begins. You light the hearth, assuming you didn't let the coals go out overnight, in which case, good luck. You check on the sourdough starter, feed the animals, haul water from the creek or well, and make breakfast. That usually means porridge, oats if you're lucky, corn mush if you're not. Occasionally a dried apple or smear of jam makes it special. But let's be honest, by special, we mean it doesn't taste exactly like yesterday. The kids, if you have any old enough to stand, are already assigned chores. Little ones might gather eggs. Older ones might help grind grain or churn butter. No one gets a free ride, not even the 5-year-olds. And don't think for a second that your gender gets you out of anything. The division of labour is real, but it's not about ease. It's about necessity. By mid-morning, the work has splintered into a dozen tiny projects. You might be mending fences, tending to a vegetable patch, patching a leaky roof, or scraping animal hides for future shoes. And while you're doing that, your neighbour's over trying to fix their broken ploughshare with a hammer that has no handle and the power of optimism. Someone else's child is wandering barefoot through the snow. No one bats an eye. It's just life. The rhythm of your day is set not by a clock but by the sun. When it rises, you rise. When it's high, you break for lunch. Usually cold leftovers and hard bread. When it begins to lower, you wrap things up. It's not romantic, it's practical. You have maybe 6 hours of decent light to get things done, and oil for lanterns is expensive and limited. So you hustle. Evenings are quieter. After supper, vegetable stew if you're lucky, root soup if you're not. You clean up, read scripture, and maybe sing a hymn or two with the others. No musical instruments, though. The Ordnung forbids it. It's just voices, raw, slow, and echoing like something older than memory. You sit by the fire and listen to the logs pop, your fingers curled around a mug of boiled water with dried mint. If it's a Sunday, maybe you're hosting church. If it's not, maybe someone's visiting with a new story or news from a nearby settlement. Social life in 1690s. Amish country is as much about practicality as it is about community. And it's at night, when the fire's dying and your bones are heavy, that it really hits you. This is the rest of your life. Not a season, not a phase. Life. No vacations, no sabbaticals, no easy button. Just one long string of days shaped by faith, frost, and farming. And yet, there's peace in it, in the repetition, in the rules, in knowing your place, even if your place involves feeding chickens before you've even had a sip of water. The peace doesn't mean it's easy, not at all. You watch a neighbour limp home with a twisted ankle that might not heal right. You see a woman lose her newborn in the 3rd week of winter and still show up to sew her sister's dress the next morning. You learn to grieve quietly and in motion. You don't stop. You can't. Still, there are small joys. A perfect loaf of bread. A calf born healthy. A child who finally remembers to latch the barn gate. And sometimes, when you step outside just as the sun starts to rise, the mist curling off the fields and the birds beginning their wild chatter, you feel it. That sense that maybe, just maybe, this crazy idea of starting a whole new world from scratch wasn't so crazy after all. Let's say you've finally got a roof over your head that doesn't leak every time it thinks about raining. Great. Now let's talk about what happens when your stomach growls and the root cellar is looking suspiciously empty. Food in 17th century Amish life isn't just sustenance. It's labour, planning, community, and a little bit of survivalist panic all rolled into one. You don't get food, you make it, from scratch. Every bite is the end result of days, sometimes weeks, of effort. Every meal is tied to weather, luck, muscle, and God's mercy. So when someone tells you what's for dinner, it's not just stew. It's a small miracle. This morning, for example, you're making breakfast, which is a charitable word for what's happening in your smoky little kitchen corner. First step, coals. If you were wise, and you're learning, you banked last night's fire just right, and there's still a heartbeat of heat left. If not, you're starting from scratch, using flint, steel, and that smug little bundle of tinder you swore you'd keep dry but absolutely did not. Once the fire's alive, you get your iron pot swinging gently over the hearth. You add water, some crushed dried corn, and stir until it thickens into mush. Sound bland? It is. If it's a special day, you might toss in a sliver of pork fat or a drizzle of molasses you bartered for. If it's not, you just tell your kids it's nourishing and distract them with a slice of apple. That works once. Food out here is seasonal, heavily reliant on your garden, your livestock, and what you've been able to preserve. Forget oranges. Forget spices unless you brought some with you. Forget sugar unless someone in your settlement had the foresight to plant cane or import a precious bag from the city. And coffee? Who told you coffee was coming? They're a liar and we don't talk to them. Lunch, if there is one, is usually cold. Maybe yesterday's soup, a piece of dried sausage, or a thick slab of bread with a smear of homemade lard. If it's summer, you might have fresh vegetables, radishes, cabbage, wild greens, anything that grows fast and doesn't mind a little neglect. Dinner is the main event. Not because it's fancy, but because everyone's exhausted, and sitting down to eat feels like the closest thing you'll get to a reward. The classic 17th century Amish supper might include a simple stew, potatoes if you're lucky, maybe carrots, wild onion, and chunks of whatever animal was unfortunate enough to wander too close that week. The broth simmers slowly, absorbing flavour from bones and herbs. You serve it with bread, always bread, because that's your filler, your staple, your security blanket. Now let's talk bread. You've learned the rhythm of it by now. The yeast, wild, unpredictable, often grumpy. The flour, coarse, stone ground, rough on your teeth. You mix it by hand, knead it with forearms sore from chopping wood, and let it rise under a linen cloth near the fire. Bake it in a cast-iron Dutch oven or a primitive clay oven out back, and hope the kids don't throw stones at it again. They will. They're bored. Canning and drying. Oh, you're deep into that now. It's autumn and you know what's coming. You slice apples thin and lay them on wooden racks to dry. You pickle cucumbers in vinegar brined with salt, garlic and dill you grew yourself. You hang strings of beans to dry above the hearth. You pour boiling cider into sterilised jars and twist on homemade wax-sealed lids. And let's not forget the churn. Butter doesn't come in sticks here. You skim cream off your morning milk and churn it by hand. The process is boring. Your arms ache, and your kids refuse to take turns. The end result? A pale lump of gold you press into a mould and guard with your life. Butter is currency. Butter is status. You give some to the neighbour when her husband falls off the roof. That's a big deal. Salt is another treasure. You buy it when you can, trade for it when you can't. Without it, you can't cure meat, preserve vegetables, or make food taste like anything but sadness. The same goes for vinegar, honey, and rendered fat. You begin to see your pantry like a medieval dragon sees gold. But food isn't just survival, it's culture. And on Sundays or feast days, or weddings or barn raisings, you pull out the stops. You bake pie. Not the flaky, buttery kind with perfect lattices. The dense, heavy kind that could double as roof shingles. But it's sweet. Maybe made with dried cherries. Maybe apple. Maybe something you foraged and prayed wasn't poisonous. When the community comes together, there's a table, actually several tables, and everyone brings something. Noodle dishes, sausage links, hot soup, sweet breads. There are no menus. You eat what's offered, and you eat until it hurts a little because you don't know when you'll get to again. Still, even with all the effort, food scarcity is a very real fear. Crops fail, animals die, winters stretch long. Your neighbour's cow disappears and you find wolf prints near the tree line. The deer have learned that your cabbage is an all-you-can-eat buffet, and frankly they're jerks about it. But what you learn, slowly, is that food is how the Amish survive more than physically. It's how you show love. You don't say, "I'm proud of you." You slide someone a piece of smoked ham or a fresh-baked roll. You don't say, "I'm sorry your wife died." You bring them soup. You don't complain, but you do pile someone's plate higher than everyone else's if they've had a bad week. And when you gather around the table the candles flickering, the children quiet for once, the stew steaming in thick ceramic bowls, when you bow your head to pray and hear only silence except for the fire crackling, you feel something real, something earned. This food may be simple, but it's holy in its own way. You've got your belly full of stew, your boots drying by the hearth, and maybe, just maybe, you've earned a moment to sit down and breathe. Don't get used to it. Because your cabin, charming as it is barely more than stacked logs and stubborn hope. And now it's time to do something about that. Building a homestead in the 17th century Amish world is like constructing IKEA furniture with no instructions, half the screws missing, and the sinking realization that your hammer is also doubling as a cooking pot. But you've got grit, and a community, and more importantly, a deep-seated refusal to go crawling back to Europe and admit defeat. So, where do you begin? With logs, of course. Trees you've felled over the past weeks now lie in a neat row, their bark scraped, their ends squared. You and a handful of neighbours begin fitting them together like puzzle pieces. No nails, no blueprints, just sharp tools, hard labour, and the quiet understanding that everyone's doing this together. The first real cabin you build is modest. 1 room, dirt floor, low roof. It's not pretty, but it's solid. You notch the corners so the logs lock together tightly. Between them, you stuff chinking, a charming mix of clay, straw and moss that keeps the cold out and the mice in. Or maybe it's the other way around. A single window lets in light during the day. At night, it's just the glow of the hearth and whatever tallow candles you can spare. Furniture is handmade. Benches, a table, a few pegs hammered into the walls for clothes. Beds are wooden frames filled with straw or corn husks, covered in heavy quilts stitched from old clothes and scraps. You lie in it at the end of the day and feel every bump, every straw tip poking you in the ribs. Somehow, you sleep like a rock anyway. The roof is pitched, not just for rain runoff, but so snow won't pile up too dangerously in the winter. You cover it with thatch or hand-split shingles, depending on what your land gives you. When the first storm rattles it, you lie awake, half praying, half guessing whether you should be sleeping in the barn instead. And speaking of barns, those come next. A proper homestead isn't just where you live. It's where your animals live, your food gets stored, your tools hang, and your firewood dries. The barn is the beating heart of your land, and building one is no small thing. You don't do it alone. Barn raisings are one of the few times Amish life gets openly festive. You plan it weeks in advance. Neighbours from miles around arrive early in the morning, axes and saws in hand, ready to build a full-size barn in a single day. It's like magic meets architecture meets extreme sports. Women bring food, a lot of it. Pies, stews, bread and gallons of cider. Kids run around like feral squirrels. Men haul beams, balance on rafters, and shout instructions in Pennsylvania Dutch. No one takes credit. Everyone works like it's their own barn because next month it might be. And by sunset, you're looking at a building that didn't exist that morning. It's one of the few days in the year when you feel like part of something bigger than survival. Something strong, cohesive, the bones of a future. As you fill the barn with tools, many of them handmade, you begin to realize just how limited your technology is by design. The Amish don't chase innovation. They chase function, simplicity, sustainability. Your tools are wooden, iron or bone. Your shovel may be sharpened from a scrap of plough. Your cart uses wooden pegs instead of nails. Your butter churn is powered by your child's boredom and your endless supply of patience. Inside the house, the design is equally restrained. No decorative flourishes, no vanity mirrors, no paintings or lace curtains. Every object has a purpose. Even your curtain rods are just branches you sanded down and wedged into the wall. And then there's the hearth, the centerpiece. It's not just for cooking, it's your heat source, your light, your comfort. You learn to manage it like a delicate animal. Too little fuel and you're freezing. Too much, and you've set your chimney on fire. You keep a kettle of water hanging over it at all times, partly for tea, partly for emergencies, and partly because there's something weirdly comforting about the constant low gurgle. Let's not pretend this is glamorous though. The floors stay dirty. The smoke gets in your clothes and lungs. There's no insulation beyond what you jammed in the cracks. Every now and then, you wake up to find a raccoon has wandered inside and made extremely poor decisions involving your food storage. Still, there's pride here. Not the sinful, flashy kind, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing you built something with your hands that keeps your family warm, dry, and upright. You look around and realise this little structure, cobbled together from felled trees and calloused effort, is your castle. One night, during a heavy downpour, you sit in the doorway and watch the rain bead on your roof and slide off, clean and controlled. Inside, the fire's burning low. The kids are asleep. You've got a warm cup of cider and a fresh loaf cooling on the table. No wolves, no leaks. You made this. You. By now you've built your home, your barn, your makeshift garden patch, and maybe even a decent fence that your goats keep testing like little horned escape artists. You're officially settled, which in Amish terms means you're never more than 12 hours away from your next round of grueling labour. But this morning the sun's just starting to push through the fog, the rooster's already auditioning for opera, and you've got chores stacked before breakfast, because in the 17th century Amish world, morning routines don't wait for vibes. You're awake before dawn, not by choice but because life demands it. The rhythm of your day starts with a shiver. You can feel the cold seeping in from the stone floor before your feet even touch it. The hearth has burned low overnight. You bank the coals like you were supposed to, but fire has a mind of its own, and this morning it decided to be petty. You throw on your heavy wool outer layer, still slightly damp from yesterday's snowstorm. Your hair smells faintly of smoke. Your fingers are numb as you fumble for your boots, which you'll regret not stuffing with hay the night before. That's what passes for cosy insulation these days. Who needs fuzzy slippers when you've got goat-scented hay between your toes? First stop, the animals. You step outside into the pre-dawn stillness, your breath puffing out in clouds. The world's muffled in snow, and the crunch beneath your boots is the only sound for miles, besides the occasional low moo or indignant squawk of a chicken that does not approve of being up this early. You unlatch the barn and are immediately met with a gust of warm, damp air and smell. It's a mix of hay, manure, steam, and animals who have zero personal space boundaries. The cows blink at you like you've personally offended them by not bringing snacks. The goats are already plotting. Milking comes first. You light the lantern, settle onto the low wooden stool and get to work. There's a rhythm to it. Squeeze, squirt, squeeze, squirt. The milk hits the pail with a hiss, warm and foamy. You do this by hand, because of course you do. Machines aren't part of your world, not because you can't use them, but because you won't. You believe simplicity is sacred, and that means if your wrist cramps halfway through milking, well, offer it up to the Lord and keep going. Once the milking's done, you fork hay into troughs, check water buckets, sweep manure into the compost pile, and try to keep your youngest from accidentally stepping in something squishy and traumatic. The chickens are easier, though they eye you like you're stealing their eggs. You collect them anyway, placing each one carefully in a woven basket. You whisper a thank you, maybe out of habit, maybe out of superstition. Back inside, the kitchen is still cold, but at least now you've got milk and eggs. You stir the coals until they flare back to life, feed them a few split logs, and hang your blackened kettle over the flames. Breakfast today? If the fire behaves and the baby doesn't start screaming, you'll manage cornmeal mush and fried eggs. If not, cold bread and milk. Again. But it's not all just drudgery. There's a comfort in the rhythm, a kind of peace in knowing what comes next. When your hands are kneading dough, or your feet are crunching snow, or your mind is just humming with hymns while you peel potatoes, it's quiet. And after everything you escaped in Europe, raids, prisons, burnings, that quiet is its own kind of luxury. Once the morning chores are done, the real work begins. Maybe today you're helping a neighbour raise a smokehouse, or mending that section of fence the wind took out. Maybe it's laundry day. which, spoiler alert, is less about gentle suds and more about hauling water, boiling it, scrubbing clothes against a washboard until your knuckles bleed, and then hanging it all to dry in air that could freeze your eyebrows. Or maybe today you're butchering a pig. Yeah, let's talk about that. Butchering is a community event. It's also not optional. You need protein, you need preserved meat for the winter, and there's something deeply grounding about using every part of the animal. It's not pretty, but it's honest. The men handle the kill. Quick, efficient, done with a prayer. The women start prepping, scalding water for hair removal, long tables for gutting, kettles for rendering fat. You make sausage, salt the hams, smoke the bacon. You pack lard into crocks to be stored in the root cellar. You even use the bladder as a storage pouch for spices and the stomach for scrapple. Waste is a sin here. Once everything's cleaned up and the sun is starting to dip, you head back inside. You peel off your outer layers, damp with snow and sweat, and settle near the hearth. Your legs are sore, your back is a knot of regrets, but your family is fed, your pantry fuller, and your roof still standing. This is your life now, repetitive, hard, quietly heroic. You're not chasing wealth or fame or anything remotely modern. You're chasing faith, balance, a world where morning chores and milking are sacred acts because they keep you alive and honest. You think back to Europe, cathedrals, cities, courts. All of it felt like noise. Out here, in the frozen hush of a Pennsylvania morning, all you hear is wind in the trees and the slow clink of milk hitting the pail. It might not look like much from the outside, but to you, it's everything. You're getting used to the rhythm now. The early mornings, the never-ending chores, the ritual of washing your hands in icy water and pretending it doesn't sting. And while no one's tossing you a Michelin star anytime soon, you are becoming something of a frontier chef. So let's settle in and talk about what you're really eating out here. Every day, every week, every painfully long season. Welcome to your 17th century Amish kitchen, where nothing is fast, everything is earned, and flavour is a happy accident. Let's start with your ingredients. Picture your pantry. No tins, no labels, no boxes, just a few wooden shelves holding jars, crocks, sacks, and maybe a mysterious bundle of herbs tied up with string. Flour is coarse, milled from the wheat you grew yourself, or, if you're lucky, bartered from the local miller who may or may not hold a grudge because your goat once ate his laundry. Cornmeal, though. You've got plenty of that. Corn grows well here, and it's become your new best friend. You've learned to get creative. You fry it, mush it, bake it into flat, chewy cakes. Sometimes you mix it with milk and lard to make dumplings. Sometimes you just sigh deeply and eat it with salt. Again, protein is harder to come by. Your chickens give you eggs most days if the foxes haven't visited. You keep a few pigs, though butchering one is a big event and not something you do often. You might trap a rabbit or catch a fish from the creek if you're feeling lucky and patient. Most meat gets salted or smoked immediately. Fresh meat is a rare luxury, usually reserved for Sunday's guests or someone just gave birth and they deserve a roast. Soup is your go-to dish, day in, day out. You make it in a black iron pot, the kind that's seen more action than a soldier. You toss in whatever's around, potatoes, turnips, beans, onions, maybe a chunk of ham. You stir and stir and stir some more, because time is the one thing you always have. It simmers all day while you do everything else, filling the house with a smell that says, yes, this is home, and yes, you're eating root vegetables again. On good days, you make dumplings to float on top, sticky little clouds of flour and lard that soak up the broth and make the whole thing feel more like a feast. On bad days, you drink broth and pretend it's the same. Vegetables, when in season, dominate your plate. In spring, it's dandelion, greens and radishes. In summer, you're swimming in beans, cucumbers and tomatoes. You dry what you can what you can't, and pickle what's left. Your shelves start to look like a chemistry set gone rogue. Jars filled with murky brine and floating, slightly suspicious objects. But when winter hits, those jars will feel like buried treasure. Then there's bread. Every day you bake, It's not optional. Bread fills you up when there's nothing else, and it's the closest thing to comfort you've got. You've learned to eyeball the dough by now, when it's too wet, too dry, or just right. You knead until your arms feel like boiled noodles. Then you cover it with a towel and let it rise, hoping the fire doesn't die in the meantime. Your oven? Maybe it's a clay beehive style built behind the house. Maybe it's a Dutch oven buried in hot coals. Either way, there's no timer, no little window to peek through. You bake by instinct, smell, and sheer nerve. Sweets are rare, but not impossible. You've got molasses from sorghum or trade, maybe a little honey, maybe dried apples from that tree you almost chopped down last fall but didn't, because you got distracted by a fox fight. You boil apples into sauce, bake them into tarts, dry them into chewy slices that live in a bag on the shelf and disappear way too fast. When someone has a birthday, or you just need morale, you whip up something almost pie-adjacent. Crust made from lard and flour, filling made from dried fruit, molasses, and a lot of crossed fingers. It's not pretty. It's not even round. But you dust it with a little cinnamon, your one exotic spice, and suddenly everyone's smiling like it's Christmas. And speaking of drinks, forget about coffee. That ship literally hasn't arrived yet. You drink water, hopefully from a clean source, or warm cider, or thin ale brewed in your neighbour's barn. For something hot, you make tea from dried mint or wild chamomile, steeped in boiled water and sipped like medicine. Which it kind of is. Food is a full-time job. There's no store, no takeout, no convenience. You grow it, gather it, hunt it, milk it, bake it, preserve it, and clean up after it. Every meal is a process, and yet it anchors your day. And here's the twist. You don't cook alone. Your family, your neighbours, they rotate in and out. Someone shows up with extra beets and leaves with a jar of sauerkraut. Someone else shares their noodle recipe, and next thing you know, you're making egg noodles from scratch while your kids run around with flour in their eyebrows. Food is survival, but it's also language, hospitality, celebration. Your community eats together whenever possible. On Sundays, after church, the tables stretch across rooms and porches. Bowls and platters and loaves and jars, all passed hand to hand. No one goes hungry. No one eats alone. Even the grumpy elder who never speaks more than 3 words sits down with a bowl of dumpling soup and mutters, "Not bad." That's high praise. And yes, you still miss cheese. Real cheese. Not the weird, crumbly stuff you tried to make once that made your whole kitchen smell like wet laundry. You'll try again. You always do. By now, you've embraced the work, the weather, and the weird number of turnips in your life. But let's take a moment to focus on something more. Fashionable. And by fashionable, of course, we mean painfully functional, aggressively plain, and actively resisting everything trending in 17th century Paris. Let's talk about what you're wearing, and why it matters more than you'd think. Getting dressed as an early Amish settler isn't about style. It's about obedience, simplicity, uniformity. The Ordnung, your community's unwritten code of behaviour, governs what you eat, how you speak, and yes, exactly how many pins are holding your bonnet in place. It's not a fashion guideline, it's a moral compass. So when you open your little wooden chest in the corner of your cabin, what do you see? For starters, earth tones, lots of them. Browns, greys, navy blues, dull greens. No bright colours, no bold patterns, and absolutely, absolutely no frills. Your wardrobe is the visual equivalent of a whisper. It's designed to blend in with the land, the sky, and the other 30 people in your village wearing the exact same thing. Your dress, or tunic if you're on team male, is hand-sewn from linen or wool, depending on the season. The linen itches in summer, the wool is never quite warm enough in winter, but you wear it anyway because it lasts. Your one Sunday outfit is just a cleaner, slightly less patched version of the same thing. If you're a woman, you wear a plain dress with a full skirt, an apron over it, and a cap on your head. A small white prayer covering tied or pinned under your chin. It's your badge of humility and submission. And yes, you wear it even while churning butter, chasing chickens, or dragging firewood through 2 feet of snow. If you're a man, you're rocking broad full trousers, held up not with a belt but with suspenders. Belts are too flashy, too military. You wear a collarless shirt, a vest, and if it's cold, a simple wool coat. Your hat is wide-brimmed, black or brown, and never ever decorative. Think pilgrim minimalist with a side of weather-resistant humility. And let's not forget the shoes. Heavy leather boots if you can afford them. Otherwise, clunky homemade shoes, or, if you're really feeling brave, wooden clogs. Socks are hand-knitted, often by your mother or spouse, and they itch in ways that make you question your relationship with God. Now here's where it gets interesting. Buttons. You'd think buttons would be a non-issue. They're small, useful, harmless, right? Wrong. Buttons, in the Ordnung's logic, represent pride, ornamental vanity. Military uniforms had buttons. Aristocrats wore decorative gold ones. So guess what's not allowed on your Sunday vest? That's right, no buttons. Instead, you fasten your clothes with hooks, eyes, pins, or just some really aggressive tucking and folding. The result is a wardrobe that's not only plain, but slightly inconvenient. You spend more time getting dressed than you'd like. You pin things, repin things, lose a pin, jab yourself, repeat. It's a process. And yet, it's an act of faith. Every pin, every drab stitch is a quiet protest against worldliness. Because the Amish don't just wear their values, they weave them in. Clothing is community too. When someone needs new pants, the neighbour brings over a bolt of homespun. When someone gets married, the women gather to sew her new cap. When a baby is born, you wrap it in hand-me-down blankets that have outlived their original owners. There's no brand envy, no seasonal wardrobe refreshes. Your clothing tells everyone at a glance that you belong here, and that you aren't trying to impress anyone except maybe the Lord. There's also a gendered rhythm to it all. Women sew constantly. There's no store to buy new clothes, and no such thing as disposable fashion. Every stitch matters. You mend until fabric gives up entirely, and then repurpose it into something smaller. Baby clothes, a quilt square, rags for scrubbing soot from the hearth. Men work leather, patch boots, and occasionally sit by firelight pretending they're helping, while looking confused by a needle. It's a delicate balance. There are a few subtle clues to identity hidden in the wardrobe. Unmarried women wear black caps. Married ones switch to white. Unmarried men don't grow beards. Married men do. But only the beard, never a moustache. Why? Because moustaches were associated with military officers in Europe, and in this community, peace isn't just a belief, it's a visible boundary. You learn these symbols over time. You start noticing that the woman who always walks behind her husband isn't shy. She's showing deference. That the man with the new beard probably just got married. That the old man who still wears boots tied with rawhide instead of proper laces is clinging to some forgotten rule no one enforces anymore. Every thread, every choice, every omission. It's all a quiet language. And sometimes, clothing becomes rebellion. The teenager who sews blue thread into a seam. The boy who wears a shirt with a tiny button, just to see if anyone notices. The girl who trims her apron with a little lace passed down from her grandmother before the rules got stricter. These aren't acts of fashion, they're tests. Tiny, silent protests in a world built on obedience. But mostly people stay in line, not because they're afraid, but because the Ordnung is about more than rules, is about identity, unity, a belief that looking the same helps be the same, that pride comes not in flash but in function, that your clothing shouldn't shout but it should serve, so when you step outside in the morning dressed like 50 other people who also skipped buttons and matched their bonnets to their aprons, you feel something anchoring you. Not style, not comfort, belonging. By now your hands know how to build a barn, bake a loaf, and wrestle a sheep without losing your dignity. But there's another, less visible structure running through every part of your life. It's not made of wood or stone. It's made of expectations, traditions, and a whole lot of unspoken rules. It's called the Ordnung, and yes, it's as intense as it sounds. The Ordnung isn't a book you can flip through while sipping mint tea by the fire. There's no handy pamphlet titled "So You've Joined an Amish Settlement. Here's what not to do." Instead, it lives in memory, in behaviour, in the way you live your life from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you crawl back into that scratchy straw mattress at night. It's the unwritten code of your people. You don't question the Ordnung, or at least you don't out loud. You just absorb it, like smoke in your clothes. You grow up knowing which chores are yours, what clothes are appropriate, how much eye contact to make with the preacher, and which hymns are okay for singing slowly. You learn that simplicity isn't just a virtue, it's a survival tactic, and that stepping out of line might not get you locked up, but it will absolutely get you shunned. That's right, shunning, the quiet hammer of Amish justice. You've heard whispers about it since you were old enough to understand whispered things. Maybe it started with Brother Moser, who built himself a rocking chair with curved legs. The Ordnung said furniture should be simple, square, and motionless. So naturally the bishop had questions. Moser ignored them. Then came the silence. No one would eat with him. No one would trade with him. His own cousins sat apart at worship. His wife, bless her, tried to keep the peace, but the rocking chair stayed. And just like that, he became a ghost in plain sight. The Ordnung doesn't scream, it freezes. You were a kid when it happened, and you still remember that chair. But the Ordnung isn't just a fear machine. It's also glue. It binds everyone together in a shared rhythm. It tells you how to handle disputes, quietly, how to confess sins sincerely, how to build your house, plainly, and how to use tools very, very carefully, and never anything that makes life suspiciously convenient. Electricity? No. Fancy metal stove? No. Decorative lace curtain with little ducks on it? Absolutely not. You might be wondering, who enforces this unwritten rule book? The elders do. The bishop, deacon, and ministers. None of them are trained clergy, just men chosen from within the community, usually by a lot, which is kind of like drawing straws but with more prayer and slightly more existential dread. They serve for life, they don't get paid, and they definitely don't get special privileges. If anything, they work harder than everyone else, because now they're not only trying to keep their livestock alive, they're responsible for your spiritual survival too. The bishop's house is the one with the widest benches and the strongest coffee substitute. He leads the Sunday worship. He makes the final call on tough decisions. He also visits people who are drifting, maybe someone who's getting a little too creative with their clothing choices, or building furniture that suspiciously resembles a chaise lounge. The deacon, meanwhile, acts like a spiritual detective. He checks in with families, listens, reports back. He's not there to tattle, but if you've been quietly reading forbidden books or singing non-approved songs, he'll know. And then there's the ministers, less judgmental, more hands-on. They're the ones you turn to when your child's sick, your roof collapses, or you just need to talk about whether God is testing your patience, or just has a weird sense of humour. Together they keep the Ordnung alive, and not in some abstract dusty theology kind of way. They keep it alive through example, through correction, through a steady gaze that makes you adjust your collar and repin your cap without even realising why. But here's the real kicker. The Ordnung changes, slowly, quietly, reluctantly. But it changes. Maybe it allows buttons, if they're hidden. Maybe it permits rubber on buggy wheels to reduce noise. Maybe it lets you use a gasoline-powered threshing machine, so long as it's mounted on a cart and technically not touching your barn. These little loopholes are debated in long, slow meetings where everyone sits on hard benches and talks around the issue for hours, sometimes days, until a consensus is reached. Once it's agreed upon, it becomes the new normal, not because anyone yelled, because everyone agreed to lean the same direction. That's the power of the Ordnung. It doesn't crush you, it shapes you. It trims the edges, smooths the splinters, until eventually you look around and realise that everyone, despite different faces, families and faults, moves in a kind of quiet harmony, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts, and yes, sometimes it does hurt, because when someone breaks the Ordnung, the fallout is personal. You don't just get in trouble, you lose connection, people look through you, meals happen without you, your children are invited to fewer things, you're not cursed or condemned, you're simply excluded. Unless you come back, unless you confess, humble yourself, stand up in church, knees shaking, and say, I strayed. And if you do, you'll be forgiven, welcomed, fed, sat beside again. But the memory lingers, and so most people stay in line, not because they fear punishment, but because they fear separation, and because deep down they believe the Ordnung, for all its silence and stiffness, is a path to peace. So you wear the clothes, you churn the butter, you skip the buttons and quietly forgive the person who forgot your birthday. Because the Ordnung isn't just about right and wrong, it's about staying together. Sunday comes slowly. It arrives not with the clang of church bells or the flutter of hymnals, but with quiet preparation, a low hush in the air that says, today we rest, but not like they rest. You know what day it is the moment you wake up, not because it feels different. Your roosters have no respect for calendars, but because the rhythm has shifted. The chores are lighter, the cooking simpler, and everyone's wearing their good clothes, which to be clear are still plain, scratchy, and suspiciously similar to their weekday clothes, but less stained. A win is a win. Sunday is church day, and in the 17th century Amish life, that's not just a check mark on the weekly to-do list. It's the backbone of everything. It's how you stay connected. To God, yes, but also to your neighbours, your Ordnung, your identity. It's the invisible string tying you all together in a world that wants nothing more than to pull you apart. And here's the kicker. You don't go to church. Church comes to you. There are no chapels or cathedrals in your settlement, no steeples, stained glass, or pews. Instead, every other Sunday, your home, or someone else's, is transformed into a sacred space. Furniture is pushed aside. The best room is cleared. Wooden benches are brought in from a shared shed and lined up like soldiers. A table becomes a pulpit, a small one, because humility. The room smells faintly of soap and cedar, with a hint of boiled potatoes from the kitchen that refuses to mind its own business. You've known since last week that it was your turn to host, which means your Saturday was intense. You scrubbed floors until your knees gave up. You baked more than you thought your oven could handle. You even made sure the outhouse path was swept. Why? Because this isn't just a spiritual gathering. It's a communal spotlight. You're not trying to impress anyone, of course, but also you are. Around mid-morning, the first buggies appear, simple wooden carts pulled by horses that are somehow both sleepy and suspicious of everything. Neighbours arrive in clusters, men in dark coats and hats, women in black caps and heavy shawls, children running underfoot until someone hisses their name and they go stiff like hunted prey. People gather inside quietly. Greetings are simple, a handshake, a nod, maybe a murmured Gott zum Gruß, God's greeting. There is no small talk, no gossip, no, did you see what Sarah wore last week? Not out loud anyway. You take your seat on one of the cold benches, back straight, eyes forward, and then the singing. If you've never heard Amish hymn singing, well, it's an experience. There are no instruments, no tempo, and no rush. The songs are long, really long. The melodies stretch like molasses, slow and steady, each syllable unfolding like a prayer wrapped in honey. It's not meant to entertain. It's meant to anchor. You sing from the Ausbund, the oldest Anabaptist hymnal in existence. No musical notation, just words. Some of them written by martyrs imprisoned centuries before you were born. You can feel the history in each verse, the weight of voices that sang this same song in caves, barns and dungeons. You don't sing well necessarily, but you sing together, and that's the point. After the hymns, the bishop rises. He doesn't stand behind a pulpit, he doesn't shout. His voice is calm, steady, and maybe a little hoarse from hauling hay the day before. The sermon isn't short. There's no countdown timer in the corner. This is a slow burn. He reads from scripture, sometimes switching between German and a bit of English, if he suspects some of the younger ones are drifting. He doesn't tell stories. He doesn't crack jokes. He reminds you, gently, persistently, that this life is temporary, and that peace with God requires humility, obedience, and a healthy fear of getting too comfortable. You shift on the bench. Your legs are numb. Your stomach is wondering when lunch is happening, but you listen. After the sermon comes testimony, a chance for others, elders, ministers, sometimes just a farmer who feels moved to speak. They share their struggles, their hopes, their reminders that the Ordnung, strict as it may be, is there to protect, not punish. They talk about Brother Yoda, who returned after 3 months of shunning and was welcomed back with tears and cider. They mention the young couple who asked if they could add a second window to their cabin and were told, gently, lovingly, no. Then comes Gebet, prayer. You kneel, on the floor, no cushions, no exceptions. Men on one side, women on the other. The bishop prays aloud, slow and heartfelt, no dramatic language, just gratitude and need, wound tightly together. When he says Amen, it rolls through the room like a release. You rise, legs wobbly, soul slightly steadier, and then lunch. Oh yes. If you survive church, you've earned this. Long tables are set with simple food. Bread, pickled beets, hard-boiled eggs, cheese, apple butter, maybe slices of cold sausage. It's humble but abundant. Everyone eats. Everyone talks. Softly now, like someone cracked the lid off the pressure cooker and let out the steam. The kids run wild again. A pie gets dropped. Someone laughs. For a moment, the strict order melts into warmth. You share stories, news from nearby settlements, rumours about a new family arriving from the old country. You hear someone mention that Philadelphia is growing fast. You nod like that's not deeply terrifying. By late afternoon, the benches are back in the shed. The floors are swept. The dishes are washed. People begin to leave, one buggy at a time, each rolling off into the dimming light like a chapter ending. You sit in your kitchen, finally alone, and feel the day settle into your bones. Your ears still echo with hymns. Your knees ache. Your spirit oddly feels fuller than when you woke up. Tomorrow the grind resumes. The chores won't do themselves, but today reminded you why you're here, why you stayed, why this plain, quiet life matters. It's not flashy, it's not fast, but it's sacred. The sky is still dark when you hear it. The thump, thump, thump of boots on packed earth, the creak of a barn door and the low murmur of voices. It's not a storm, not a wild animal, just another ordinary morning in the 17th century Amish world, and another day where every man, woman and child knows exactly what's expected of them. And I do mean exactly. See, in your world there's no debate about who does what, when or why. Gender roles aren't up for discussion. They're baked into your day like the bread in your oven. And whether you agree with them or not, well, doesn't really matter. Because out here, in the unforgiving wilds of early Pennsylvania, order isn't just preferred, it's survival. If you're a man, your day starts with muscle. You chop wood, plough fields, haul water, sharpen tools, fix fences. If something breaks, you repair it. If something dies, you bury it. You're expected to provide, physically, financially, and spiritually. You lead morning prayers. You teach your sons how to shoe a horse, aim a musket, non-violently of course, and build a smokehouse without accidentally torching the barn. You're also expected to be humble, gentle, God-fearing. Strength is good, but only when yoked to submission. You're not a tyrant. You're not a showman. You're the steady hand that holds the plough and the household alike. If you're a woman, oh honey, buckle up. You do everything else. You rise before the men, dress in the dark, and start the fire. You cook, clean, sew, spin, tend the garden, chase chickens that don't respect boundaries. You nurse the baby while stirring soup with one hand and shushing 2 toddlers with the other. You make soap from rendered fat. You mend everyone's clothes until the fabric gives up and becomes quilt patches. You keep track of everything. What's running low? What needs planting? Which neighbour needs help after a hard birth or bad harvest? You are the hidden engine of the entire operation. And while the men might be outside working the land, you're inside making sure no one starves, freezes, or bleeds out from a poorly aimed axe. It's not glamour, it's grit. Gender roles aren't just duties, they're identities. From the moment a child can walk, they're nudged into one track or the other. Boys get tiny hammers, girls get tiny brooms. Boys help in the field, girls learn to hem handkerchiefs. And yes, there's always that one girl who climbs the hayloft and builds traps for raccoons. Or that one boy who quietly sneaks off to help his grandmother bake. People notice, but they don't say anything. Not right away. You, of course, are somewhere in the middle. You're just trying to stay afloat, follow the Ordnung, and make it through the week without burning dinner or dropping a heavy beam on your foot. Now let's talk about respect. Respect is a currency in your world. It's earned, not demanded. The man who boasts, laughed at behind his back. The woman who gossips, tolerated but politely avoided. Everyone watches everyone, not out of cruelty but out of necessity. If someone stumbles, everyone feels it. You survive as a unit, or not at all. And yet, there's tenderness too. After a long day, you might see your father washing his hands in the basin, silently thanking his wife with a kiss on the head. You might see a mother whispering encouragement to her daughter as she stumbles through her first quilt square. You might see two brothers trading tools and grins while pretending not to be proud of each other's work. There's love here. It just wears a plain dress and keeps its voice low. Marriage, of course, is the goal. Not in a sweep me off my feet kind of way, but in a let's build a life and survive winter together way. Girls marry young, boys slightly older. You court quietly, under watchful eyes. You go to singings. You take buggy rides. You sneak little glances across church benches and try not to blush. When you're serious, you let your parents know. Then their parents know. And then, eventually, if no one objects, you make it official. Once married, the roles harden. The man becomes head of the household. The woman becomes the heart. She might not speak in church, but she speaks plenty at home, guiding, calming, keeping everything stitched together. He might not cry openly, but he carries burdens no one sees, financial, spiritual, emotional. There's friction, sure. Some men are harsh, some women are bitter. The Ordnung doesn't fix that. But the structure gives you rails to grip when life gets bumpy. It doesn't promise happiness, but it does offer clarity. Still, things shift. You've seen it. That older woman who takes the lead during childbirth, calmly instructing the men to leave the room. That unmarried uncle who raises his niece after her parents die, becoming the best caregiver anyone's seen. These moments challenge the borders, blur the lines, quietly, gently. No one calls it rebellion, but everyone notices. And in your own life, maybe you've started to ask quiet questions too. Why can't women speak in worship? Why must men do all the preaching? Why is pride a sin for some, but not for others? You don't say these things out loud. Not yet. You know better. You keep them tucked in your apron pocket next to your needle and your quiet stubbornness. Because here's the truth. Gender roles in your world are strict, but not unyielding. They bend, not fast, not easily, but they do. Through necessity, through tragedy, through quiet courage. And maybe one day, your daughter will take apart a plough and no one will blink. Maybe your son will churn butter and bake the best chouflé pie this side of the creek, and people will just nod and ask for seconds. But for now, you do what's expected. Not because you're brainwashed. Not because you're afraid. But because you believe deep down that order keeps the wolves out. And maybe, just maybe, if you keep walking the path, you'll find room for grace somewhere between obedience and truth. You hear them before you see them. Quiet footsteps in the snow, the murmur of a low voice, the creak of a buggy wheel turning ever so slowly past your window. Then, the knock. 3 gentle taps on your cabin door. You open it and see them standing there. A young man with a hat clutched in his hands, eyes darting everywhere but at you, and beside him, your daughter. Cheeks pink and eyes bright with the kind of nervous energy that usually ends in either marriage or disaster. It's courtship season in your community, and whether you're ready or not, someone's bundling. Let's break that down. In the 17th century Amish world, romance is a slow-burn candle with a very narrow wick. There are no love letters, no stolen glances under gaslight, no accidentally brushing hands in the wheat field while a dramatic soundtrack swells. What you get instead is deliberate, supervised, deeply awkward, and surprisingly sincere. It starts at a singing, that's right. If you're young, unmarried, and feeling feelings, you head to someone's house on Sunday evening after church. The benches are pulled back out, the hearth is roaring, and the air is thick with potential, and maybe the smell of roasted parsnips. Everyone sings hymns together, loudly, slowly, passionately, if by passionately you mean with excellent posture and absolutely no touching. This is where connections form, where a boy's voice cracks mid-verse and a girl pretends not to smile, where a girl sings the harmony just right and a boy starts thinking, well, maybe she's the one. If someone catches your eye, you don't walk up and say, hey, want to go grab cider sometime? No, that would be English behaviour. Instead, you make a plan. Subtle, formal, and entirely chaperoned, unless it isn't. Which brings us to bed courtship. Oh yes, it's as weird as it sounds. See, in some old order Amish communities, it's tradition for a courting couple to spend the night together, in bed, fully clothed, with a wooden board between them, or a sewn-up sack, or just a mountain of blankets depending on the local flavour of awkward. It's called bundling. The idea isn't lust, it's intimacy without physical temptation. You talk, you share stories, you see if you actually like each other when you're not surrounded by the distractions of chores and community. You're vulnerable. In a world where conversation is often practical, even curt, this is your chance to be honest. Sometimes someone sits in a corner of the room to make sure things stay honest. Sometimes they don't. And sure, it gets abused from time to time. Some couples cross the line. Some communities quietly stop the practice altogether. But here, in your settlement, it's still a thing. And tonight, your daughter is bundling. You try not to hover. You trust her. You trust the young man, barely. And you trust the Ordnung, which says that if anything untoward happens, there will be consequences. Not punishment necessarily, but conversation, public apology, possibly even a wedding. Because bundling isn't just about romance. It's part of the long, slow train toward marriage, a sacred, community-sanctioned union that comes with expectations, land negotiations, dowry discussions, and a very large meal. If a couple decides they're serious, they announce their intention to the elders, quietly, humbly. The bishop brings it up at the next council. There's no surprise engagement or flashy ring. Just a soft yes, a round of nods, and a deep understanding that lives are about to be bound, not just legally but spiritually and communally. Weddings happen in the fall, after the harvest, when the ground is cold but the root cellar is full. There's no chapel, no bouquet toss, no white dress with a 15-foot train. The bride wears black. Yes, black. The same kind of dress she'd wear to church. Simple, unadorned, with maybe a white apron over it. Why? Because marriage isn't a performance. It's a covenant. A choice to walk side by side through mud and drought and illness and too many turnips. The groom wears a black suit. Maybe it's been passed down from his father. Maybe he stitched it himself, every hook and eye just so. He probably shaved for the last time in his life the night before the wedding. Once he's married, the beard stays, a symbol of maturity, commitment, and mildly itchy devotion. The ceremony is long, there are sermons, prayers, more singing. Then comes the moment. The vows, given in German, slow and steady. No flourish, just promises, sacred ones. After that, the meal. The meal. Dozens of people, tables pushed together. Stew, pickled eggs, fresh bread, cider, pie, and more pie. Everyone brings something. Everyone eats too much. No dancing, no toasts. Just laughter, conversations, and sneaky glances from other young couples wondering if they'll be next. Then the newlyweds begin their rounds. They spend the night at a neighbour's house, then another and another. It's a mix of honeymoon and service, meeting family, helping with chores, showing everyone that they're ready to be part of the village as a unit. Eventually they move into their own home, usually a small cabin near one of their parents. The community helps build it, furnish it, stock it with jars and tools and enough dried beans to question the very concept of flavour. And just like that, the circle continues. It's not glamorous, it's not spicy, but it's steady, rooted, deep. And tonight, when your daughter and her suitor say goodnight, still fully dressed, still separated by a suspicious number of blankets, you exhale. Love in this world is patient. It's a quiet morning, a rare one where the wind isn't howling and the cow didn't kick over the milk pail. The frost on the window melts slowly in the first light, and inside you can hear the clink of a wooden spoon on a pot. Someone's already up, and for once it isn't you. That's because today isn't your day to work, it's your day to learn. Or if you're a child in 17th century Amish country, it's more like, today you will sit still, pay attention, and hopefully not get smacked with a switch. Because let's be clear, childhood here is short, simple, and mostly spent preparing for adulthood at alarming speed. There's no extended adolescence or teenage phase with mood lighting and deep thoughts under the stars. Once you can carry a bucket, you carry a bucket. Once you can churn butter, you churn butter. And once you can learn to read, you start memorizing Bible verses so fast your brain might sprout a hymn book. Still, there is something called school. Sort of. Let's start with what it's not. It's not a building with a bell tower and 12 desks all lined up neatly. In your settlement, there's no formal schoolhouse yet. That'll come later. For now, education happens where everything else does. At home or in the community's one shared room. A simple wooden structure that doubles as a meeting place, voting hall, church overflow space, and general catch-all for anything requiring a roof and a strong moral compass. You're taught by someone who may or may not be a teacher by trade. Maybe it's the widow in her 40s with a sharp memory and an even sharper look. Maybe it's the deacon's second cousin who once owned 2 books and therefore achieved expert status. They're not certified, they don't have chalkboards or shiny red apples, but they care, fiercely, and that's what counts. You enter the one-room schoolhouse, or the back room of someone's cabin, carrying a slate, a rag, and a knotted piece of string you call a belt, but mostly use for emergencies. You sit on a bench that squeaks every time someone breathes. It's cold in the winter, sweltering in the summer, and somehow smells like pickled cabbage year-round. You get used to it. The subjects? Well, it's a short list. Reading, writing, arithmetic, scripture. That's it. No poetry, no history, except biblical. No science unless you count God made the stars and that's enough. You learn to read so you can read the Bible. You learn to write so you can copy verses. You learn arithmetic because someone has to keep track of bushels and debts. And you learn patience because this bench is so hard. School starts after breakfast and ends when the sun dips below the trees, or the teacher's voice finally gives out. The room is lit by windows during the day, candles or lanterns if it gets too dim. There's no recess, but there are chores. Firewood to gather, chamber pots to empty, someone's baby to rock if mama had to step out. You share books, if there are books at all. Many times you learn by repetition. The teacher recites. You repeat. Over and over, until the words stick to your brain like dried molasses. The younger kids sit up front, wide-eyed and terrified. The older ones sit in back, yawning and occasionally getting whacked with a twig for losing focus. Discipline is swift, firm and non-negotiable. Talking out of turn gets you the paddle. Slouching earns you a glare that can melt snow. But most of the time, the punishment is just disappointment. And trust me, that cuts deeper than any switch. But here's the thing, you're proud to be here. In Europe, kids like you weren't even allowed to learn. Reading was reserved for clergy, writing for scribes, and the idea of a child growing up literate and spiritually grounded was laughable to most authorities. But here, in your Amish community, education is sacred, not because it leads to college or careers, but because it keeps you close to God. And the adults are watching, not hovering, not micromanaging, but watching. You're not being prepped for personal success. You're being shaped for usefulness, for community. You're expected to absorb not just knowledge, but values, humility, obedience, frugality, respect. You help sweep the room at the end of the day. Maybe the teacher lets you read aloud from the Froschauer Bible, the one printed back in Zurich, its pages yellowed and corners softened by generations of small fingers. Maybe you stumble over the German. Maybe the other kids snicker. But maybe the teacher places a hand on your shoulder and says, "Again." And this time, you get it right. Outside of school, the learning never stops. You're taught constantly by parents, neighbours, older siblings. You learn how to plant a row of potatoes, how to stitch a hem, how to carry a bucket without sloshing, how to get a fire going even when the wood's damp, how to chop kindling, knead bread, ride a horse, and pluck a chicken without plucking your own fingers off. These aren't electives, they're survival. Children are expected to become useful early, and they do. A 7-year-old in your world can clean a lantern, milk a goat, and count eggs better than most modern adults with a calculator. You don't get a trophy, you get a nod, maybe a second helping at supper. And honestly, that's enough. There's no graduation, no cap and gown, no moving up ceremony, just the slow, quiet realization that you're being trusted more, that someone hands you the axe instead of just pointing to it, that you're invited to listen in when the men talk about fence repairs or when the women plan who'll help during the next birth. That's your diploma, being useful. And when the day's done and you lie in bed, brain buzzing from scripture and subtraction tables, you think, maybe not in words, but in some deeper knowing, I belong here. Because school, in your world, isn't about escape. It's about rooting deeper. The thaw comes slowly, almost shyly, like it's not entirely sure it's welcome. After months of frozen ground, wind-burned cheeks and frozen water buckets, you had to crack open like a hammer to an ice cake. The change feels suspicious. But the air softens. The snow recedes in patches. And one morning you step outside and wait. Is that mud under your boots? Spring is here, which means you can finally stop worrying about frostbite and start worrying about everything else. Because in the 17th century Amish life, spring isn't a season. It's a full-time job with zero training and no days off. Your body still aches from winter, your joints creak, your hands are cracked, and your back has a suspicious twinge from one too many nights hauling logs to the hearth. But now, there's no time to rest. The land is calling, the animals are calling, your pantry is whispering ominously about how few potatoes are left. It's time to plant. But first, the thaw. That glorious, messy, ankle-deep period when the snow melts, but the ground hasn't quite remembered how to behave. The earth turns into a sponge, your boots gain 5 pounds of sludge, and the cabin starts to smell like wet wood and goat. Everyone's a little snippy. Everyone's a little hopeful. It's mud season. Nobody's favourite, but everyone's familiar. Your first real job? Ploughing. The soil has to be broken, turned, shaped into neat rows like God's own comb ran through the ground. You harness the oxen if you've got them. Slow, stubborn beasts with eyes like they've seen some things and wish they hadn't. If not, it's you, a wooden plough and a prayer. You guide it through the soggy earth, one slow pass at a time, hands blistering, muscles screaming, and the smell of wet soil thick in your nose. And it's not just fields. The garden, that precious plot behind the house, needs just as much love. You rake the beds, pick out rocks that magically grew over winter, spread ash from the hearth to enrich the soil. You mutter to the weeds like they're old enemies, because they are. Next comes planting. You reach into your burlap sacks full of seeds carefully saved from last year's harvest. Corn, beans, Squash, potatoes, turnips, so many turnips. You push them into the ground, row after row, gently covering them with the same soil that froze your toes 3 months ago. You water with buckets hauled from the creek, because your arms weren't tired enough already. Then you wait and weed and pray nothing eats the sprouts before they even break through the surface. Meanwhile, the animals are losing their minds. The chickens are laying again, scattering eggs in places you forgot existed. The goats are feistier. The cows are shedding winter coats like it's a competition. And the real fun, birthing season. Calves, foals, piglets. It's a whole barnyard maternity ward. If you've never delivered a lamb in the middle of the night while knee-deep in straw and muttering Psalm 121 under your breath, then friend, you haven't truly lived the Amish frontier experience. And it's not just animals. Babies of all kinds are arriving. You help the neighbour woman through her 4th birth while your own toddler tries to eat the soap. You boil water, wash linens, hold hands, whisper comfort. Birth, like death, happens quietly here, but never alone. Now let's talk rain. Rain in spring is a coin flip. Sometimes it's a blessing, soaking the fields, feeding your seeds, helping the rhubarb pop up like some biblical miracle. Other times it's a soul-sucking downpour that floods your root cellar, drowns your sprouting beans, and makes your freshly mended roof leak in exactly the spot you thought you'd fixed. You fall asleep to the sound of dripping and dream of dry socks. And speaking of fixing things, spring repairs, winter broke everything, the fence posts are wobbly, the chicken coop leans suspiciously, the hinges on the barn door shriek like banshees, your wagon wheel has a crack the size of your index finger. You spend every free hour, free, hammering, mending, patching, painting. By the end of the week, you've used up all your nails and half your patience. But there are bright moments. The first time you open the windows and the breeze smells like grass instead of frozen goat breath. The first flower poking through the soil, maybe a crocus, maybe a dandelion you'll pretend is a crocus because your heart needs a win. The first warm morning when you sit on the porch with your calloused hands wrapped around a cup of warm cider and you don't shiver once. And let's not forget the community work days. You help neighbours raise new barns, repair storm-damaged roofs, or clear land for first-time farmers. Everyone brings tools, food, and that odd sense of camaraderie that only comes when you've all been freezing, sweating, and surviving together. Women lay out lunches on long planks balanced across barrels. Soup, bread, butter, pickled things, and pie. Always pie. Children chase chickens. Men holler across the fields. Someone inevitably drops something on their foot. Someone else tells a joke you've heard 6 times and you laugh anyway. Spring is exhausting, dirty, loud, glorious. By the end of the day, you're back in bed, your back aching, your fingernails black with soil, and your boot sitting by the door, caked in mud that refuses to be scraped off. Your eyes close and you think not about flowers or sunshine, but about beans and fences and whether that calf's limp is getting better or worse. Because spring isn't about blooming, it's about beginning again. The sun hangs high and heavy, pressing down like it's trying to iron the whole world flat. You squint up at the sky and already regret it. The flies are out, the goats are extra vocal, and your shirt, stuck to your back in a way that suggests it has now joined you in eternal union. Welcome to summer in Amish country, where the days are long, the work is longer, and no one remembers what cool feels like. This is the season of sweat, soil, and sustenance. You're up early, earlier than usual, which is saying something. In the cool, pale hours just before the sun sets everything on fire, you get outside and try to get ahead of it. Watering, weeding, checking the corn for signs of raccoon sabotage. These early hours are precious, sacred, because by noon, the world turns into a shimmering skillet. Your fields are alive, and by alive we mean wild. The corn's nearly shoulder height. The beans have twisted into every nearby surface like little green serpents with ambitious dreams. Your tomato plants are starting to give up trying to stay upright. You tried staking them. You tried twine. They laughed. You gave up and called it natural structure. The real work of summer, harvest and maintenance, everything's growing at once and everything demands attention. You haul water from the creek in sloshing buckets. You weed like your eternal soul depends on it. And depending on the elder in your district, it might. You pick, pluck, dig and trim, sweat dripping down your neck, sunburn crawling up your forearms. There's also hay. And if you've never put up hay in a wool shirt in 90-degree heat while being attacked by grasshoppers, let me set the scene. First you cut it, usually with a scythe, unless your district permits a horse-drawn mower. The smell is rich and sweet, like dried sunshine. Then you rake it into rows with long wooden rakes that look like medieval torture devices. After it dries in the field, you gather it into haycocks, big, awkward mounds that make you itchy just looking at them. Finally you load it into the wagon, pitchfork by pitchfork, then climb on top and try not to fall off as the horse lurches forward. You sneeze 15 times, your clothes are full of straw, your arms are scratched, and you haven't had water in an hour. But when the hayloft is full and the door is closed against the coming storms, you stand there, sweaty, covered in hay dust, and entirely victorious. You'll sleep well tonight, if you can find a straw-free patch of bedding. Preserving food also kicks into high gear during summer. You're in the kitchen half the day, surrounded by steam, flies, and jars. So many jars. Canning peaches, beans, pickles, tomatoes, applesauce. The stove runs hot all day, and the air inside your cabin becomes a spicy, acidic fog of vinegar, sugar, and fatigue. You sterilize jars in boiling water, fill them to the brim, seal them with wax or lids, and line them up on shelves like soldiers ready for war. You feel oddly proud when the shelf fills, like you've conquered time itself. Meanwhile, the kids are feral. There's no school. There's no snow to trap them inside. There are just endless hours of daylight, overgrown grass, frogs, and mysterious projects involving rope, wheels, and sharp objects. You let them run wild, mostly wild. They help with chores, but they're also kids, and this is the only time of year they can be barefoot from sunup to sundown, and come home smelling like swamp water and joy. Evenings are when you breathe. Dinner is often eaten outside. Bread, cold vegetables, boiled eggs, maybe a slice of ham or smoked sausage if you're feeling fancy. You sit in the shade, your plate on your knees, your back against the house. The breeze is soft. The sky turns gold. The sound of crickets begins to rise, and if you're lucky, the mosquitoes take the night off. You talk in low voices, maybe about the weather, maybe about whether that new family's barn raising will happen before or after the next heat wave. Maybe nothing at all, just the kind of silence that feels earned. And sometimes, if the mood's right, there's a little fun. You head to the river after chores are done. Men and boys splash in one spot, women and girls in another. You dunk your head under the water and feel the heat leave your bones. Laughter echoes across the banks. It's not rebellion, it's release. On Sundays, after church, you gather under the shade of the big sycamore. You sip cider, pass slices of watermelon, one of summer's few true luxuries, and watch as the children run in circles chasing butterflies they'll never catch. And occasionally someone sings, not a hymn, not something from the Ostbund, just a simple tune, soft, old, maybe from the old country, a lullaby, a folk song. No one says anything, no one judges. It drifts over the grass and vanishes into the heat. Then, of course, the storms. Summer storms don't knock politely. They arrive with thunder that shakes your teeth. The sky goes green. The wind sounds like a train barreling through the woods. You run, tying down chickens, hauling tools under cover, yelling at the kids to get inside. Rain slams sideways. Lightning cracks a tree. For 20 minutes, the world is chaos. And then it passes. The air smells like broken branches and clean earth. You check the barn, the house, the roof. You light a lantern and say a prayer of thanks, even if the rain soaked your last clean shirt. Summer is contradiction. It's abundance and exhaustion, heat and healing. It fills your table and drains your strength. It teaches you that joy can be loud. like a child's shriek jumping into the creek, or quiet, like a perfectly sealed jar cooling on the shelf. And as you drift asleep, your skin sticky with sweat and your hair still smelling like hay, you hear a whip-poor Will singing somewhere in the woods. Summer never stops, but tonight, for a moment, it slows. The trees start whispering, just softly at first. A rustle here, a shift in the way the shadows stretch across your field. You feel it in your bones before you see it in the leaves. The slow, golden creep of autumn, slipping into your world like a quiet guest who knows you're too tired to resist. And let's be honest, you are tired. Summer left you wrung out, sunburned, scratched and stained. But now comes the season of preserving, preparing and prepping like the world's about to end. Because in a way, it is. At least the world where you can walk outside without your nose freezing shut. Autumn in the 17th century Amish life isn't about pumpkin spice or decorative gourds. It's about getting everything done before snow traps you inside for 6 months. You begin with the harvest, and not the tidy, picturesque kind with someone in suspenders holding a perfect apple next to a sunset. This is serious business. The corn has to come in, the beans must be pulled and hung to dry. The cabbage, dear merciful heaven, the cabbage has to be shredded and salted into barrels of sauerkraut. You haul baskets until your arms scream. You trip over vines. You spend half the day bent over in rows, and the other half squinting at root vegetables, wondering if that's a wormhole or just a weird birthmark. Apples are everywhere. On the ground, in your pockets, in your dreams. You press them into cider, bake them into pies, dry them into leathery little slices that somehow taste like autumn wrapped in dust. The apple press becomes the centre of activity, wooden, creaky and slightly possessed. Kids take turns cranking. Adults take turns shouting instructions no one follows. The cider flows. Some gets boiled into vinegar. Some gets stashed in cool barrels. A little gets stronger over time, but no one talks about that out loud. The butchering starts now too. The pigs, who have spent all summer living their best life, are now fat and ready. The butchering is a full-day event. Men gather before dawn. The fire is built. The scalding barrels are prepared. The knives are sharpened to a shine that makes you vaguely uneasy. It's not a celebration, but it's not grim either. It's just part of the cycle. You give thanks. You get to work. The women take over afterward, rendering fat, making sausage, salting meat and stuffing entrails with terrifying efficiency. The laird is stored in crocks. The bacon is smoked. The hams are hung in the rafters. The smell lingers on your clothes for days. You don't mind. And just when your back can't take any more, canning season reaches its chaotic peak. Your kitchen becomes a steamy, glass-filled laboratory. Everything's boiling. Everything's sticky. You scald your fingers twice before breakfast and consider screaming, but the baby's asleep. You ladle soup into jars. You pack peaches with surgical precision. You seal lids and line shelves until you can barely walk without bumping into a year's worth of pears. When you look at your pantry, full from top to bottom, you feel a strange mix of peace and paranoia. You've done everything you can. But is it enough? Firewood is next. You chop. You stack. You split until your palms blister. There's a certain art to it. The way the logs fit, the angles of the stack, the spot that stays driest when the snow starts falling sideways. You'll need a lot. More than you think. You always do. The quilting bees begin as the nights grow longer. You gather with the other women around lantern light, fingers flying over fabric, needles flashing like tiny swords. Stories are shared. Laughter rises. Gossip tiptoes in, wraps itself in warmth, and leaves just before anyone gets in trouble. The quilts are practical, thick, durable. Some are patched from your husband's old trousers, some stitched with quiet care by the girl who just started courting. No frills, no showpieces, but every stitch is a kind of prayer, a hope that the coming winter won't take more than it gives. Out in the woods, you forage. Mushrooms, nuts, wild grapes. You're cautious. You've learned the hard way that edible is a spectrum. But when you get it right, a few handfuls of hickory nuts or black walnuts can mean the difference between a bland winter stew and one that almost feels like a celebration. And oh, the colours! Even in your world, plain, serious, purpose-driven, you stop for the trees. Gold, crimson, ochre, leaves drifting down like confetti from a silent divine party. You rake them up for compost. You stuff cracks in the cabin walls. But for a few moments you just stand there, watching them fall, and you remember, life can be beautiful, even when it's hard. Thanksgiving isn't a formal holiday in your tradition, but gratitude is always on the table. Before supper, you bow your head and thank God for the harvest, the health of your children, the neighbour who helped mend your fence, the cow that finally stopped limping. There's no turkey, no pie towers, just stew, bread, butter, and silence that feels holy. You gather the children and go over the winter plan. Which rooms will be closed off? How much lamp oil is left? Where the quilts will be kept? You teach them how to listen for roof leaks and how to bank the hearth coals so you don't wake up freezing. And then the first frost, it covers the world in silver. The fields are still. The barn feels warmer now than the house. You wake up with your breath in the air, and you know the season is shifting again. But this time, you're ready. You've gathered, preserved, laboured, sown. Now it's time to endure. And if you're lucky, maybe enjoy. You wake up and the world is quiet, not silent. There's still the wind, still the creak of the barn door, still the rhythmic crunch of someone walking across frostbitten ground. But it's a different kind of quiet, heavy, soft. Like the land itself has pulled on a thick wool blanket and settled in for a long nap. Winter has arrived, and out here in 17th century Amish country, winter doesn't knock politely. It barges in, boots caked in snow, demanding attention, respect, and a fire that better be going, or you'll be sleeping next to a goat for warmth. There's no easing into it. One day you're trimming the last of the cabbage, and the next. There's snow piled against your door and icicles dangling from the eaves like the house has grown fangs. The first thing you notice, aside from the cold that bites your nose before your feet hit the floor, is the darkness. It lingers in the morning, it returns early in the evening. Days feel short, nights stretch long. You ration lamp oil like it's gold, and every candle burned down to the nub is a reminder that yes, you really should have stocked up more. And so, you adjust. You move slower. Wake a little later, though still before sunrise, because Amish life doesn't take snow days. The fire is your first priority. Keep it fed. Keep it burning. The hearth becomes the centre of your world. Not just for warmth, but for light, for cooking, for drying out the wet woolen chaos your family leaves in piles near the door. Outside, everything is frozen. The fields are ghosts of themselves. The garden is buried. The trees stand like frozen sentries. You walk the grounds in stiff boots, breath clouding the air, checking the barn, the fence line, the animals. The cows hate the cold, but they deal with it. The chickens are grumpy. The goats naturally have escaped again, because snowdrifts apparently don't apply to them. You shovel paths, break ice from water buckets, check for signs of illness or injury, because a sick animal in January isn't a minor inconvenience, it's a crisis. Back inside, life shifts into its winter rhythm. It's quiet. Not because there's nothing to do, but because everything has slowed down. The loudness of summer, buzzing insects, shouting children, clanging tools, has given way to the hum of hands at work and the low murmur of conversation. You shell beans by the fire, mend socks, card wool, darn mittens, patch quilts that have started to show their age. The children still have chores, of course they do, but winter gives them more space to be, well, children. They play games by firelight, carve wooden animals with penknives, make snow creatures that immediately collapse but are still declared a masterpiece. If you're lucky, there's a sled, homemade, slightly crooked, and responsible for more bruises than smiles. Still, They drag it to the nearest slope and scream their way down like little plain-dressed lunatics. Winter meals are humble but hearty. No fresh greens, no eggs, unless your hens are feeling generous. Instead, you rely on the pantry you filled all autumn. Root vegetables, dried beans, smoked meat, pickled everything. Stew simmers on the hearth all day, filling the cabin with a smell so thick you could spread it on bread. Which you do, because bread is life. Supper comes early because the light disappears fast. Afterward, you gather around the fire. Maybe there's scripture. Maybe someone reads from the Ausbund. Maybe someone just tells a story. A real one. About wolves in the woods or floods last year. Or a made-up one about a goat that ran away and became mayor of a raccoon village. No one corrects the facts. Everyone listens. And then, quiet work. Women spin wool, fingers moving almost automatically. Men whittle or carve handles for tools that crack during the freeze. Children stitch simple samplers, lips moving silently as they repeat their verses. It's peaceful, close, like time itself has slowed just enough for you to catch your breath. But make no mistake, danger still hums at the edges. The cold is no joke. You keep the fire going because if it goes out you may not wake up warm again. You keep an eye on the snow load on the roof, listen for ominous creaks, patch leaks the moment they start. A roof collapse in February could mean exposure, illness or worse. You have no margin for error. Illness creeps in like smoke. No one's quite sure why. Maybe it's the damp, the cold, the close quarters. Someone coughs, then someone else. Before long, you're boiling water for herbal teas, adding mustard plasters to chests, whispering prayers into pale ears. There's no doctor out here, just home remedies, wool blankets, and hope. Sometimes hope isn't enough. You've seen winter take people, quietly like a candle going out. Fever, pneumonia, accidents. It's not dramatic, it's just loss. And when it happens, the community moves like a single body, bringing food, chopping wood, filling the silence with song and presence. You don't face winter alone, not if you can help it. And yet, there are beautiful moments. The way the world glows under a full moon, snow sparkling like crushed glass. The laughter of your children sledding down the hill, red-faced and howling. The feel of your spouse's hand under the quilt after a long day. The satisfaction of slicing into the last apple pie from the cellar and remembering the warmth of August. And those rare days when the sky turns bright, the snow crunches just right under your boots, and you feel, somehow, stronger than you did before. Like the cold didn't take something from you. It forged something in you. Resilience, gratitude, stillness. You tuck in the children, add another log to the fire, pull the quilt over your shoulders, and listen to the wind, to the ticking of your heartbeat, to the silence between snowflakes. Winter isn't an enemy, it's a mirror. You wake up coughing. Not the kind of cough you can ignore either. It's deep, chesty, and full of warning. The kind that echoes in the quiet hours of the early morning and makes your spouse stir in concern. The cabin's cold despite the fire, and the air feels thick, still, a little too still. You know what's coming. This is what passes for medicine in the 17th century Amish life. Which is to say, you're going to make it through this on a whole lot of faith, boiled leaves, and grit. There's no doctor to call, no neat little bottle of antibiotics, no just run to the clinic. In fact, the nearest physician is probably 2 days away by wagon, and even then, they're not always trusted. Most of them are English, outsiders, people who think they know everything just because they've got books and potions and talk fast. The Amish don't do fast. Instead, you roll out of bed with a groan and do what your people have always done. You reach for the herbs. Dried bundles hang above the hearth, horehound for coughs, yarrow for fever, echinacea if you managed to grow any last summer and remembered not to let the goats eat it. You grab a handful, boil water, steep it in a crock, and sip slowly, grimacing at the taste. If it doesn't help, you add honey. If it still doesn't help, You add prayer. You're not alone. Everyone has their go-to cure. Aunt Marta swears by onion poultices. Your neighbour boils pine needles. The deacon's wife rubs garlic into your feet and wraps them in linen. It's pungent. It's weird. But you don't argue. You just lie still and hope the sweating starts soon. Sweating means it's breaking. And don't even get started on mustard plasters. You grind the mustard seeds, mix them with flour and warm water, smear the goopy mess on cloth and press it to your chest. The burn is real. Your skin turns red. You feel like you're being cured through pain alone. Still, it beats doing nothing. Your children watch with wide eyes. They've seen sickness before. They know what it looks like when someone doesn't get better. Because here, people don't always get better. The flu, pneumonia, even an infected tooth, they're not small things. They're threats. Illness spreads fast in tight cabins, especially in winter. One cough turns into 3, then 6. Then half the settlement is holed up with red eyes and rattling lungs, and everyone's boiling water and hoping someone remembered how to make elderberry syrup. If it gets worse, you call in the community, and the minister comes, he kneels by your bedside, he prays, he asks if you've made peace with the Lord. It's not dramatic, just steady, gentle. You say yes, even if you're not sure, because there's comfort in that too. The women gather in shifts. They bring broth, warm bricks. They change the linens, wipe your brow, and speak in hushed voices that somehow make you feel both cared for and haunted. They've done this before. Too many times, and if the worst comes, there's no hospital bed, no morphine, no monitors, just hands, holding yours, and hymns, soft and slow, and a community already beginning to care for your family in your absence. Death doesn't sneak up here. It walks in the front door and is greeted by name. But let's not go there just yet. You're not dying today. In fact, after 3 days of sweating, drinking bitter tea, and coughing up things you'd rather not describe, you finally sit up without feeling like the world is spinning. Someone gives you stew. Someone else hands you a little mint water. You sip. You live. And then it's your turn to help. Because someone else always gets sick next. Maybe it's the school teacher. Maybe it's the young mother still recovering from childbirth. Maybe it's a child with a fever that just won't break. And now, you're the one boiling water, steeping herbs, whispering prayers. You know what it feels like to be helpless. So you make sure no one else feels that way if you can help it. In the spring, when the snow melts and the mud returns, the community might gather for a kind of healing walk. Not formal, not planned. But it happens. A few people walking down the path between cabins, just talking, laughing again, breathing easier. You pass the spot where you were sure you wouldn't make it, and you realise you did. Now, let's talk about childbirth, because that's its own battlefield. Here midwives are queens, not crowned or titled, but respected. They've learned the signs. They know what to do when labour stops, when the baby's turned wrong, when the bleeding won't. They have no instruments, just hands, hot towels, boiling water, and more nerve than most men have in both arms. When a woman goes into labour, the house changes. Men leave, women arrive. A quiet buzz of activity takes over. The children are shooed out or handed chores. And behind closed doors, life enters the world as it always has, with pain, prayer, and someone holding someone else's hand. Babies cry, sometimes, and sometimes they don't. Not every child survives, not every mother. The grief is deep, but the support is real. Meals appear. Firewood gets chopped. Neighbours sit in silence when words won't work. Accidents too are common. A slip with an axe, a fall from the loft, a wagon tipping. There's no such thing as OSHA regulations out here. No ambulance coming. You treat what you can. Wrap the wound, bind the limb, offer willow bark for pain. And if it's beyond your means, you pray harder. Sometimes someone's uncle swears he can set bones, and sometimes he actually can. Mental illness isn't spoken of often, not formally, but it exists. Of course it does. People have melancholy, they have troubles. You notice when someone stops coming to church, When a neighbour hasn't left their cabin in weeks, the community responds, gently, a shared chore, an unexpected visit, a fresh loaf of bread left by the door. They may not call it depression, but they recognise suffering, and they answer it with presence. That's how medicine works here. Not sterile, not fast, not perfect, but present. Your body may break, but your community holds the pieces. It starts with a silence, not the peaceful, fire-crackling, snow-falling kind, but a hollow one, like the world just skipped a breath. The house feels too still. The animals aren't making a sound. The bread on the table sits untouched. The butter knife left at an odd angle. You already know. You knew last night, if you're honest with yourself. But now, in the dim morning light, you know for certain. Someone's gone. Death, in your world, isn't just a possibility. It's a constant companion. Not a monster, not a thief. More like a neighbour who never knocks, just lets himself in when he's ready. And in the 17th century Amish world, death is always ready. There are no doctors, no warnings, no modern comfort wrapped in sterile tubing or fluorescent light. When someone passes, it happens right here, in bed, in the barn, in the woods sometimes. You don't get the luxury of distance. Death doesn't call ahead. It arrives and sits with you. You go through the motions. Someone is sent to fetch the bishop, another to gather the women. Someone else brings in the old wooden box from the storage shed, the one that's been used before and will be used again. Coffins aren't bought. They're built. Plain. Pine. Unlined. No brass handles, no carvings. The most extravagant feature is a tight-fitting lid. And that's how it's supposed to be. Because in your world, you come into the world with nothing, and you leave it the same way. Death isn't dressed up, it's honoured through simplicity. You wash the body, quietly, gently, the way you'd wash a child. It's not ceremony, it's care. You dress them in their best clothes, not a new outfit, just the one they wore to church. The cap is tied just so. The beard is combed. The hands are folded over the chest, calloused and still. Children watch. They always do. Not because they're morbid, but because death isn't hidden here. No one says they're in a better place, without also acknowledging that this place now feels emptier. Grief is real, sharp, but it isn't shameful. You cry. Others cry. You hold each other and speak softly, or not at all. The community begins to arrive almost immediately. Word spreads fast. They bring food, yes, but also labour. Someone takes over your chores. Someone else sits with the children. One neighbour stokes your fire while another patches the broken barn door you've been meaning to fix for a week. Nothing needs to be asked. It just happens. Within 24 hours, the service is prepared. The funeral is held in the home as always. The same benches you sat on during church are brought in and lined up in stiff, straight rows. There's no flowers, no music, no eulogies that romanticize or exaggerate. Just scripture, prayer. A hymn sung slow and low, the kind that sticks in your chest and echoes long after the last note fades. The bishop speaks, not about the person's earthly accomplishments, but about the brevity of life, the certainty of death, and the peace of being right with God. There's no celebration of life banner, no slideshow of memories. The memory is the people gathered, the stories shared after, the silence held together. After the service, the coffin is carried out, usually by family. There's no hearse, just a simple wagon. The road to the cemetery is uneven. The wheels creak. No one speaks. You walk behind it, bundled against the wind, boots crunching through snow or mud or fallen leaves, depending on the season. The burial is quiet, the grave is hand-dug. There's no vault, no ornate headstone, just a simple wooden marker. Maybe their initials, maybe not. You lower the coffin with ropes. Someone recites a final prayer. Then the dirt goes back in, shovel after shovel until it's done. And then people go home. But the community doesn't disappear. In the days that follow, they return, with bread, with cider, with shoulders to lean on. They sit with you, work beside you, say nothing or everything. Grief is personal, but it's never private. It doesn't belong to just one person. It ripples through the whole. And slowly things return to normal. Except, of course, they don't. Not really. You still reach for their voice, still expect to see them at the table, still catch yourself saving a portion of stew or listening for their boots on the porch. Grief, in your world, isn't something to get over. It's something you carry, like firewood, like the weight of snow on a roof. Heavy, yes, but bearable when shared. Some believe the dead linger, not as ghosts. That would be far too theatrical. But in the way their chair creaks when no one's in it, the way their scripture marker stays right where they left it, the way your hands repeat their motions, chopping, kneading, sewing, and feel somehow guided. Children ask questions. Where did they go? You answer honestly. To the Lord. They nod. Not because they understand, but because they trust you do. Death shapes your community. It keeps you humble. It reminds you of the Ordnung, of the values that ask you to live each day with purpose, with kindness, with caution. It's the final punctuation mark in a life that was never meant to be flashy, just faithful. And when your time comes, because of course it will, you hope someone will remember how you patched roofs, or laughed too loud, or grew the best beans anyone ever tasted. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will sing that same slow hymn over your grave, and someone else will carry your firewood while your family rests. Because here, death is not the end of love. It's the beginning of memory. The world doesn't end when someone dies. It just stumbles forward a little quieter. And eventually even that hush begins to fill again, with footsteps, with laughter, with chores that don't care who's grieving. The fields don't stop growing. The animals don't stop eating. Life in your 17th century Amish world keeps moving, and so do you. Because in this life, rhythm is everything. Your days are not ruled by clocks or calendars. Not really. You don't have a wall full of ticking machines or a watch that buzzes when it's time to pray. You've got the sun, the seasons, and the unwritten rhythm of the Ordnung, that unspoken rulebook everyone knows by heart, but no one ever writes down in full. So let's talk about it. Not death, not birth. Just the structure of your everyday, the invisible scaffolding that holds everything together. Your morning begins when the sky's still grey. The rooster's crow doesn't wake you. You're usually up before he even gets his beak in gear. You wake not because it's time, but because it's time again. There's a rhythm to your body now, trained by years of rising with the light, even in winter's darkness. You dress in silence. No rush, no wardrobe decisions. It's the same set of clothes you wore yesterday and the day before. Black or navy, plain, durable. Nothing flashy. Buttons if your district allows them, pins if they don't. Everything has a purpose, no fashion, just function. You get dressed, and your clothing says to the world, I am not here to impress you, I am here to live well. The chores begin, chores that rarely change, only adapt with the seasons. You feed the animals, milk the cows, check the barn for signs of mischief, looking at you, goat number 3. You haul water from the well, and that task alone can take longer than most modern folk spend thinking about water all week. You split kindling for the fire, repair what broke yesterday, and if there's time, start baking or mending or building whatever the day quietly insists must be done. And then, breakfast. Not a rushed bowl of grain or something you grab on the way out. It's hot, hearty. Eggs, bread, maybe ham. Butter churned just days ago. Coffee if your community allows it, and if not, maybe hot water with mint or dried apple peel. You sit, you eat together. There's no TV, no newspaper, no distractions, just the sound of chewing and maybe someone reading a psalm to begin the day. Work continues after, on the land, in the garden, at the loom, or in the barn. The men and older boys take to the fields. The women and younger children manage the home, the food, the fabric, and the fire. These tasks might look divided, but they're interlocked. Without one, the other fails. It's a partnership. Quiet, firm, and necessary. Lunch isn't extravagant, but it's warm. Always warm. Maybe soup or leftover stew, fresh bread, and something pickled to keep things interesting. You rest for a moment. Maybe read a few verses, then back at it. The day hums forward in a steady loop. No alarms, no meetings, just purpose. What about Sunday? Now that's where the rhythm gets especially sacred. Every other Sunday you have church at home. Not a building, not a cathedral. Just one of the community's houses, rotating, shared and opened freely. Benches are brought in. The floors are scrubbed. The children are told, again, to sit still and stay quiet. The service is long. 2, maybe 3 hours. Hymns sung without instruments. Sermons delivered in Hochdeutsch, the formal German of the Bible. Men on one side, women on the other. No back rows, no stage. Just voices and stillness and the occasional cough that echoes like a cannon. And afterward, fellowship. Everyone stays for a meal. Soup, bread, something sweet if the host family planned ahead. You eat standing sometimes, out in the yard, balancing bowls and talking in low voices. Children sneak cookies. Elders discuss weather patterns like they're debating politics. It's slow and sacred. Church isn't just about theology. It's about proximity. Between church Sundays, you have quiet Sundays, a chance to rest, reflect, visit, write letters, or simply do less. Not nothing, of course. That's too modern, but less. A pace that honours the soul. Evenings are another rhythm altogether. As the sun fades, so does the noise. You gather inside, light the lanterns, sit by the fire. The last chores of the day, feeding, fetching, fire tending, wrap up. You wash, maybe read, maybe stitch. The conversations are soft if they happen at all. The rhythm slows now and it's supposed to. Eventually you go to bed, not with ceremony, just with the final tug of exhaustion. Your body curls beneath the quilt, still warm from the fire and the closeness of others. You fall asleep not worrying about what tomorrow will bring, but trusting that tomorrow will simply follow today, as it always has. And so the rhythm continues. It doesn't crave change. It doesn't ask for excitement. It just repeats, faithfully, like the beat of a heart, like the ticking of time when time is measured not in hours, but in harvests and hymns and how many loaves are left on the shelf. This isn't monotony, it's harmony. Because in your world, order isn't oppressive, it's anchoring. The Ordnung isn't just a list of rules, it's a song, a quiet one, with no chorus, no solos and no sudden key changes. But if you live inside it long enough, you start to hum along. And someday, when someone asks how you knew what to do with your life, you'll smile and say, I didn't. I just did the next thing. You're standing in the barn, pitchfork in hand, half listening to the chickens arguing with themselves again, when you hear it. Hoofbeats. Slow, steady, rhythmic. Not the work kind. Not the your neighbour's goat escaped again kind either. This is deliberate. A buggy is coming, and it's coming down your lane. You wipe your hands on your apron, if you're not already wearing one that's long since accepted its fate as permanently stained, and step outside. The buggy pulls up, the horse snorts, and out steps a man in black. Not the bishop, not your cousin from 2 farms over. It's an outsider. A plain-dressed one, sure, beard, hat, no buttons. But you can feel it, something's different. Because today, you're not just following the rhythm of home. Today you're rubbing up against Amish authority. And not the kind with gold stars or gavels, the kind that speaks softly, quotes scripture faster than you can churn butter, and has the power to change lives with a single sentence. Let's talk about church authority, the way it holds your community together like tightly spun wool, even if that means occasionally pulling too tight. The man at your door, he's a visiting elder from another district, here to talk. Not to scold, yet, but to listen, ask, maybe correct, and if necessary, to discipline. You invite him in, offer warm cider, and the kitchen becomes a courtroom. No shouting, no robes, just the Ordnung, the Bible, and that unspoken question hanging in the air. Are you still one of us? Because out here in 17th century Amish life, obedience isn't optional. This isn't some authoritarian nightmare, though. It's not about ego or domination. It's about unity. The Amish believe that a divided community is a dying community, that even a single thread pulled too far from the fabric can unravel the whole thing, which means everything comes back to Gemeinschaft. Togetherness, mutual submission, accountability. You follow the Ordnung not because you agree with every rule, but because you trust that the whole is wiser than the individual. If you've got a concern, like, say, your nephew wearing suspenders a little too wide, or your neighbour installing a new stove with way too much glass in the door, you don't gossip. You talk to them, kindly, biblically, Matthew 18 style. If that doesn't work, you bring it to the ministers. There's a whole council of leaders in every district, the bishop, 2 or more ministers, and 1 or 2 deacons. These aren't elected officials. There's no campaigning. They're chosen by lot. That's right. After prayer and nomination, slips of paper are handed out, one of which is marked. The man who receives it becomes the leader. No debate, no arguing. Just God's will, determined by human hands and divine mystery. Once chosen, these men serve for life. The bishop is the top shepherd. His role is massive, spiritual, administrative, and often deeply personal. He handles everything from weddings and funerals to disputes over buggy roofs and marital counselling. He's not paid. He doesn't get perks, he just gets expectations. And oh boy, are there expectations. Now let's say someone has stepped out of bounds. Not criminally necessarily, just willfully. They've stopped coming to church. They've ignored counsel. They've started doing something that threatens the Ordnung. Maybe installed glass windows that shine too brightly. Started using new tools without permission. Or expressed ideas that hint at pride. What happens next? Meidung, shunning. It sounds harsh, and it is by design. But not for the reasons outsiders imagine. Meidung isn't about cruelty, it's about clarity. It says, we love you, but we cannot affirm your choices. The shunned person is still visited, still helped in emergencies, but they are not shared with, not sat with, not eaten with. Meals are the line. No table fellowship until they return. It's a spiritual boundary drawn with trembling hands. And here's the thing, it works. Most of the time. Not because people fear punishment, but because they fear separation. No phone call, no letter, no text will ever replace the warmth of being fully in step with your people. So many return, humbled, quiet, ready to be folded back in. Forgiveness comes easily here, not cheaply, but easily. The same community that disciplined you will weep when you return. You'll be greeted not with suspicion, but with a bowl of soup and a chair pulled up close. Because discipline isn't the end. Restoration is. And sometimes the authority turns inward. You've seen leaders struggle. The bishop overwhelmed. A deacon grieving. A minister silently wondering if he still believes. They're not above it all. They just carry more. Which is why the community prays for them. Daily, often silently. They're not admired, they're upheld. Still, not everyone stays. Some push back, hard, leave the fold, start new sects, break away. Even in the 1600s, these fractures happen. Some believe the Ordnung is too harsh. Others believe it isn't strict enough. It's messy, painful. And the scars remain in the fabric of every district that has ever lost a family. But most stay. Because in this world, obedience is not oppression. It's belonging. You live with limits so that the centre holds. You give up a little freedom so that you're never alone. You submit not to men, but to a vision of harmony, humility, and a God who speaks not through lightning or drama, but through the slow, stubborn grind of ploughing a straight furrow year after year. So when the visiting elder finishes his cider and stands to leave, you feel a weight, not fear, but gravity. You understand the cost of community, and you accept it again. He tips his hat. You nod. The buggy turns around and the hoofbeats fade down the lane. Tomorrow you'll rise with the sun. Still Amish. Still part of something ancient and strange and quietly powerful. You didn't mean to listen in. But when you're stacking firewood behind the cabin and the wind carries voices just right, it's hard not to catch a few words. Not full sentences. Just fragments. But enough to know the young ones are talking about Rumspringa again. That word. That little rebellious ripple in your otherwise quiet pond. You roll your eyes just a bit. Then you pause. Because deep down, you remember. Not the word itself, since you didn't call it that back then, but the feeling. That creeping question. The itching curiosity, the wonder. What if I lived differently? Because even in 17th century Amish life, so wrapped in Ordnung and routine and reverence, not everyone is always sure. Especially not the young. You see it most when the boys start standing taller, trimming their beards too neatly, when the girls' bonnets are just a bit too decorative, when someone's cart suddenly has slightly fancier carvings than anyone asked for. They're not breaking the rules, not yet, but they're leaning on them, testing the joints. That's the prelude to what the English would later call Rumspringa, a period of adolescent questioning and exploration. But in your time, in the 1600s, it's not formalised. There's no official go wild and come back later policy. No secret parties or buggy races, at least not openly. What you have is a tension. Young people are caught between two worlds, the solid, known world of their families and the wide, glittering unknown of what lies beyond the fields and forests. They hear whispers from other sects, from tradesmen, from travelling preachers. They see glimpses, cloth dyed the wrong colour, the hint of lace, a smuggled book, a forbidden tool. And they wonder, is our way the only way? That wondering is dangerous and vital. The community knows it's coming, and instead of crushing it, they offer something more radical, space. Not to sin wildly, not to abandon their faith, but to choose it freely. That's the heart of this unspoken season of soul wandering. You don't get baptized as a baby here. Baptism is for adults, for people who choose it. But no one can choose what they've never questioned. And so the elders watch, quietly, as the young ones wrestle, not with scorn, with patience. Your niece stops coming to church for 2 weeks. People notice. No one panics. Instead, her mother keeps setting a place at the table. Her father mentions her by name in the blessing. When she walks back in, bonnet slightly wrinkled, eyes downcast, the bishop smiles at her like nothing happened. 'Cause in a way, nothing did. She's just growing up. And here, that growth is allowed. But sometimes it's more than skipped services and stubbornness. Sometimes they leave, not forever, but enough to stir the village. A boy might go west, join a different sect, chase the promise of easier work and fewer rules. A girl might fall in love with an outsider. It happens, painfully, quietly, and with a slow fracture you feel in your teeth. When they leave, the community doesn't slam the door, they keep it ajar. Meals are packed, letters are written. If they marry outside the faith, they might be shunned. If they return repentant, they're embraced without hesitation. There's no celebration, just a bowl of soup and a return to chores. But many don't leave at all. Most come back, eventually, after sowing some very mild oats, after walking into a marketplace full of colour and noise, and coming back with a headache and a fresh love for quiet. They sit down, they talk to the bishop, they say, "I'm ready." And then, when the time is right, they're baptized, publicly, solemnly, and for life. Because once you're in, you're in. Baptism here isn't just a rite, it's a vow. Not to God only, but to each other. You're saying, these are my people, this is my Ordnung, I'm in all the way down. And from that day on, you're no longer a watcher, you're a participant. You sit on the adult side of the room at church. You can be married, you can be shunned, you can vote. It's not glamorous, but it's real. You carry that vow with you daily, in your dress, in your speech, in the way you pull weeds and greet neighbours and resist the urge to sharpen your axe with the new whetstone someone just brought over from England. You're not just following rules, you're inhabiting them. But what if you're not sure? What if you never feel ready? That happens too. Some delay for years, some quietly abstain, and the community waits, because rushing faith leads to fragile roots. Better a slow bloom than a fast fall. Baptism, once made, is binding. The elders would rather see hesitation than hypocrisy. And still, there's a kindness in all of it. No one throws stones, no one shouts, no fire and brimstone sermons aimed at teenagers with wandering eyes. Just gentle reminders, invitations to come home, a hand placed on a shoulder, a meal saved on the table just in case. And maybe that's the most radical part of Amish adolescence. Not the rebellion, the patience, the space to wonder, to wrestle, to drift a little, and God willing to return. It starts with smoke, thin and spiralling, drifting from a chimney that hasn't seen firewood in months. Then the thud of hammers, the creak of wagons arriving, the sharp clatter of tools being unloaded one by one from a neighbour's barn. Then come the voices, low at first, then louder, then laughter, always laughter. You know what this is. You can feel it. It's a barn raising. And in your 17th century Amish world, there's no event more exhausting, more chaotic, or more quietly miraculous. This isn't a party. It's not a potluck with a little work tacked on. It's a mobilized army of kindness, 100 people moving with a single purpose, as if coordinated by invisible thread. When a family's barn burns down, or a newly married couple needs one built from scratch, the district doesn't debate. They just show up, and you, of course, are one of them. The morning starts early, before light. You tie your boots, grab your gloves, and step outside into the crisp dawn. It smells like sawdust already, like wet earth and hot bread, because someone's up baking breakfast for 50 men and twice as many kids who will eat like wolves later. You arrive at the site and the bones of the barn are already lying there, hewn beams stacked like puzzle pieces too large for one family to ever solve alone. But that's the point. You don't solve this alone. The bishop says a short prayer, everyone bows their heads, and then you raise a barn. Literally, there's no ceremony to it, no applause, just the creak of timber, the grunts of effort, the low call and response of men coordinating the next beam. Ready? Ready? Lift. Hold. Peg. Someone hammers. Someone holds steady. Someone else climbs the frame like they've got goat feet instead of boots. It's part work, part choreography, and part daredevil nonsense. You're not even sure how you got up on the second level, honestly. You were hauling a mallet and now you're standing on a narrow ledge 20 feet in the air, holding a wooden peg in your teeth like it's a carrot. You should be scared, but you're not. Not really. Because there's always a hand to catch you. Always someone steadying the beam. Below, the women work just as furiously. Not on the barn, but on the meal that will feed the army. The outdoor ovens are roaring. Tables are spread with cloths. Pies are cooling. Stews are simmering in kettles so big you could probably bathe a goat in them. The kids run wild between wagons, chasing chickens and trying to climb unfinished ladders before being shooed away with practiced maternal speed. By mid-morning, the frame is up. Not done. Up. Standing. Watching it rise from the ground feels like watching prayer take shape. You helped build this, with your hands, your sweat, your stubborn willingness to climb something you had no business climbing. And here's the thing. No one gets paid. Not a cent. No contracts. No estimates. No promises. Just this deep, unwritten rule. If your neighbour needs a barn, you help build it. And someday, when your time comes, they'll do the same. You break for lunch on long benches fashioned from planks balanced across tree stumps. Someone says grace. The food disappears at an alarming rate. You eat like a field-planted human being, silent, focused, and slightly feral. There's beef stew, fresh rolls, apple butter, pickles, sausage, cabbage slaw, and at least 6 types of pie. You try them all, obviously. And then, back to work. You raise the roof frame next, the highest point, the most dangerous. You feel the wind up there. pressing it against your face like it's testing your resolve. You plant your feet, drive the peg, nod to the man beside you. One more beam, one more rung, one more nail. By sunset, the skeleton of a barn stands proud and ready, casting long shadows across the field. It's not finished, not yet, but it's born, and that's enough. There's no ribbon cutting, no speeches, just calloused hands slapping shoulders, laughs shared over mugs of cider, a tiredness so deep and clean it feels like the inside of a hymn. That night, the family whose barn you helped raise will sleep easier, not because the work is done, it isn't, but because they know they are not alone. Tomorrow someone will come help finish the siding, someone else will bring shingles, a cousin will install the door, a nephew will hang the lanterns, and in a month the barn will be filled with hay and tools and lowing cows and the steady, quiet rhythm of life picking back up. And maybe, in 10 years, when another fire strikes or another wedding is celebrated, someone will tap on your door at dawn and say, "We're raising another one." And you'll say, "I'll bring my hammer." Because that's how you survive out here. Not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being woven together, in work, in worship, in wood and weather and weary bones, and barn by barn, beam by beam, you build more than shelter. You build trust. You build memory. You build the quiet miracle of community in motion. It happens slowly, so slowly you barely notice it at first. A slant in the sunlight, a breeze that no longer feels warm, just less cold. You step outside one morning and see it. A single green shoot pushing through the dead winter ground like it doesn't care who told it to wait. Spring, not the loud, flowery kind with trumpets and sunshine and butterflies doing cartwheels. Not yet. In your 17th century Amish world, spring sneaks in like a thief, stealing away the frost, the silence, and the endless grey with a whisper instead of a bang. You feel it before you see it, in the way the mud clings to your boots a little looser, in the way the animals shift, more restless, more alert, like they know something you don't, in the way the hens start laying more as if they too are done with this long dim chapter. And then the real work begins, because winter was survival. But spring is resurrection. You throw open the shutters, or try to anyway. One's stuck and needs to be kicked just right. The light spills in, revealing every speck of dust your eyes forgot how to see. Suddenly the whole house looks like it's been exhaling stale breath for 3 months straight. Time to clean, and not just dusting. No. This is Amish-level spring cleaning. The rugs get dragged outside and beaten until your arms give out. The walls are scrubbed. The pantry is inventoried with terrifying judgment. Someone finds a jar of pickled carrots from last autumn, of 1633. You pretend to be impressed and quietly dispose of it when no one's looking. Quilts are aired, chimneys are swept, tools are inspected, repaired, and quietly cursed at for rusting, like they were trying to make a point. The barn is emptied, shoveled, lime sprinkled, and refilled with all the precision of a military drill. The whole world gets shaken out, and you don't stop until it smells like soap, sunshine, and effort. But the cleaning is just the overture, because the soil is calling, and when it calls, you answer. The fields are still wet but drying. You test the ground with your fingers, not your eyes. If it crumbles just right, you nod, knowingly, maybe smugly, and begin. You hitch up the horse, grab the plough, and begin carving rows into the thawed earth like you're slicing into a loaf of bread. It's hard, sticky. Your boots sink, your back aches. But it's the good kind of ache, the kind that says, we're back in motion. You plant early crops first, spinach, lettuce, radishes, peas, things that don't mind a bit of chill. The children help, but mostly just get distracted by worms and each other. You let them. This is the season of relearning joy. Your hands are dirty by noon. By dinner they're cracked. You smear on a little lard and keep going. Around you, everything is waking up. The trees bud with a cautious optimism. The birds return in 2s and 3s. like they've had a group meeting and voted to trust the weather again. The creek thaws, bubbling with a sound so clean it almost makes you cry. The smell of damp earth and manure fills your nose. You wouldn't trade it for anything. You start preparing for calves and kids and chicks. The pregnant goats waddle. The cow starts giving you that look, and you know you'll be kneeling in straw by lantern light any day now, coaxing new life into the world with cold hands and nervous prayers. Meanwhile, the women gather seeds like precious relics: corn, beans, squash, cucumbers, tomatoes. You lay them out on the table in neat little piles like they're ancient coins, each one holding the potential for food, failure, or both. You've saved these, traded for them, guarded them like treasure, and when the time is right, no earlier, you plant them. The days lengthen. Your bones remember what it feels like to sweat again. The wind stops biting and starts whispering. The children stay outside longer. Laughter starts echoing again, bouncing off fence posts and porch steps like it's been waiting its turn. Church services move back outdoors sometimes, under big trees or beside freshly turned fields. The sermons feel lighter, even when the words stay the same. The hymns carry further. You notice new babies, new faces, new wrinkles on old ones. Life keeps unfolding, and with all the work, all the digging and hauling and praying the frost doesn't return, there's still space for small pleasures. Like a walk at dusk when the frogs start up, or sitting on the porch with a tin cup of warm cider, boots off watching the sky turn gold, or hearing your child yell, "Look, Mama," while holding a wildflower like it's a trophy. You don't need much, just this rhythm, this return, this slow, stubborn promise that even the hardest season doesn't last forever. Because that's the thing about Amish Spring. It's not about beauty for beauty's sake. It's about possibility, about what might grow, what might be restored, about soil that doesn't care who you are, only what you plant. And plant you do. Not just seeds, but intentions. You choose this life again, with every furrow, every hoe stroke, every whispered prayer sent into the rising sun. It's not perfect. It never was, but it's real. And now the world is ready to grow again. So are you. You hear it before you see it. Metal clinking softly, like a bell without a ringer. Then the steady clop of hooves, the creak of a harness, the gentle roll of wooden wheels. The first market wagon of the season is headed down the dirt path, bouncing slightly over a rut from last year's freeze. The driver nods as he passes, not slowing but smiling. You nod back. Of course you do, because the cycle is complete. Winter has passed, spring has come, and now you sell, you trade, you share. This too is part of your world. You load your own cart in the early morning, while the mist still clings to the grass like it's not quite ready to leave. The sun is barely up. The chickens are still stretching, but already your hands are full. Baskets of eggs, early greens, jars of apple butter, small bundles of hand-spun yarn, a few patched garments, and maybe, just maybe, a few fine wooden toys your son carved over the winter. You're not going to market for cash alone. No one here's rolling around in silver coins. You're going to maintain the weave, the one that binds every neighbour, every family, every soul in your corner of this scattered, stubborn world. You hitch the horse, check the harness twice, and set off, the wagon creaking along a path that's been rutted into place by years of this exact journey. And there it is. The market clearing, not much more than a crossroads with some open space and a few wooden stalls. Some families bring folding tables, others spread their goods on cloth laid right on the grass. One family brought a barrel organ, again, and their oldest son is cranking it like his life depends on it, playing tunes that don't quite sound the way they did last year. You take your spot, unload your wares, lay them out just so. Nothing flashy, no shouting, but your butter's good, and everyone knows it. The man across from you gives a friendly nod and holds up a jug of cider that he insists is not stronger than it should be. You trade a dozen eggs for it anyway. This is how the Amish move through the world. Quiet commerce, wrapped in tradition. No advertising. No bartering that borders on insult. Just fair exchange. Sometimes it's eggs for flour. Sometimes it's a rug for a basket. Sometimes it's nothing but conversation and a promise that next time you'll bring more beans. But even here, there's a spark, a buzz. Young people flirting glances and shared jokes about crooked jam jars. Women trade recipes along with seeds. Men talk tools, barns, and whether Elias's buggy wheel will survive another spring. A group gathers to watch someone demonstrate a new kind of loom crank. It's a little too efficient, they decide. Suspiciously so. You spot the bishop talking with an elder. They're inspecting a hand-cranked grain mill that someone hauled in from 2 districts over. That alone could spark 3 weeks of debate back home. Progress, even modest, must pass through the fire of scrutiny before it's welcomed in. You sell out of spinach in an hour. The apple butter goes next. A younger woman lingers over your hand-stitched bonnet, eyes darting nervously before she finally whispers, "Would your daughter make one for me?" You nod. She blushes. You both understand that this is more than a trade. It's trust. And sometimes the trade is more symbolic than practical. You offer a scarf to a widowed neighbour. She tries to insist on paying. You wave her off. She'll return the kindness in kind, not in coins, but in presents. Help. A pot of soup on your porch when you're too tired to cook. By afternoon, the clearing hums with the low, content noise of community alive and moving. No loud music, no shouts of "buy now," just murmurs, clinks, and laughter in bursts, like wind across tall grass. The children play. Some splash near the creek, boots long forgotten. Others sit quietly, carving or spinning tops. One small boy is eating something he definitely wasn't supposed to find. No one stops him. The joy of it is medicine enough. At the edge of the clearing, a group begins to sing. Not loud, not for show, just a handful of voices rising together in a hymn that speaks of gratitude, of growth, of return. You don't join in, not yet. You just listen, letting the melody settle into your skin like sunlight. And in that moment, you feel it fully, the full cycle of the year. You remember the long nights of winter, the hush of falling snow, the firewood stacked too low. You remember the scraping out of the last jar of canned beans and the prayer that there would be enough. You remember the birth of calves, the loss of a neighbour, the hymns sung over bare soil. You remember the first sprout, the first egg, the first time you left the cabin without 3 layers. And now here you are, standing in the sun, boots muddy, hands busy, heart full. You didn't survive alone. You never could. This market, like the barn raising, like the funeral, like the quiet Sunday mornings, is just another thread in the wide woven fabric of Amish life. You trade goods, yes, but you also trade stories, smiles, burdens. You trade one season's grief for another's hope. You trade isolation for belonging. And as the wagons begin to roll out, one by one, you pack what little remains. A few jars, a couple bundles of chives, a pair of mittens someone admired but didn't quite need yet. That's fine. Next time. You steer the horse home. The sun is still high and the road is still long, but your bones don't ache the way they did this morning. You've been reminded again. You're part of something bigger. Not just a church, not just a family. A whole rhythm, a way, a people walking through centuries together. You don't need much, just this cart, these hands, and the quiet joy of knowing you have enough. So now, as the evening wraps around your quiet cabin and the lantern's glow dances across the wooden beams, you sit back, warm under your quilt, and let it all settle. The mud-caked boots are drying by the hearth. The market baskets are empty. The children, finally, have fallen asleep, their soft breathing a gentle metronome in the next room. Outside, a frog croaks, a barn owl stirs. Somewhere in the dark, a cow shifts in her stall, heavy with sleep and hay. You've lived through every season now. You've risen before the sun to milk cows by lantern light, and you've danced, stepped, with neighbours after raising a barn. You've wept into quilts when the loss came too soon, and smiled at green shoots defying winter's hold. You've obeyed, questioned, returned, rebuilt, and kept pace with a rhythm as old as your people's footsteps through the forests of Alsace. And for all the rules, for all the Ordnung and the whispered judgment about someone's new butter churn or unapproved bonnet lace, there's this quiet truth humming beneath it all. You belong, not because you're perfect, not because you never wondered what was beyond the next hill, but because you stayed, or maybe because you returned. This is Amish life in the 17th century, not frozen, not flawless, but faithful. And as your candle burns lower, as the wind smooths its hand over the thatched roof above, you know, tomorrow the rooster will crow, the fields will need tending, and the fire will need feeding, and the quiet, sturdy song of your life will begin again. Soft, steady, true, good night.